Chapter 811, Shocking Secret, Giving Up Cleansed Soul. Fang Yuan's expression was solemn. He continued to search Dong Fang Changfan's soul, no matter how much he persuaded him. This session was the longest so far. Fang Yuan searched Dong Fang Changfan's soul until all of his secrets were exposed. He learned about Dong Fang Changfan's life, the countless experiences he had. Gu immortal Han Dong is long since dead. After the phantom beast dragged him into the corpse mountain, he was supposed to be a captive, but he died in the heavenly tribulation and earthly calamity. So it turns out that Dong Fang Changfan had made arrangements in Jade Pool Blessed Land, using the rank 6 immortal Gu house thatched hut as the core. But at the crucial moment, thatched hut went missing. This allowed us, the demonic path cultivators, to invade Jade Pool Blessed Land. As expected, the moment I destroyed Dong Fang Yu Liang's body, and Dong Fang Changfan's soul left it, he self-detonated all of the immortal Gu in his aperture. White Lotus Giant Silkworm Gu. To think that Dong Fang Changfan used large amounts of White Lotus Giant Silkworm Gu to improve his immortal soul, within his immortal aperture, there is still a batch of White Lotus Giant Silkworm Gu left. Dong Fang Changfan, looking at his whole life, he was unresigned to being ordinary. He was first a hero, then a champion. This is, Purple Mountain True Monarch. Tai Bai Yun Xing's time path inheritance was from this person. To think that Dong Fang Changfan's wisdom path inheritance was also from this mysterious old man. The stream of secrets assaulted Fang Yuan one after another. After a long time, Fang Yuan finally reacted. He had completely taken in this huge amount of information. Purple Mountain True Monarch, this was just the name that Fang Yuan gave to the mysterious purple-haired beggar. This mysterious old man seemed to have countless precious inheritances. His background must be very profound. His motives were unknown. It could be said that he played an extremely important role in Dong Fang Changfan and Tai Bai Yun Sheng's achievements today. For now, he shall be called Purple Mountain True Monarch. In Fang Yuan's memories of his previous life, he had no recollection of this Purple Mountain True Monarch. Even during the 5 regions chaotic war, he did not appear. Did he hide himself? Did he have another identity, or did he die of old age? According to Dong Fang Changfan and Tai Bai Yun Sheng's situations, it seemed that this man was extremely old. Forget Purple Mountain True Monarch for now. My cleansed soul immortal Gu needs food. The amount of White Lotus Giant Silkworm Gu is not enough, but it can alleviate my current problem. I did not want to bother with that blessed land for now, but it seems that I have no choice. Fang Yuan destroyed Dong Fang Yu Liang's body, causing his immortal aperture to fall on the ground and become an ownerless blessed land. Unlike public blessed lands, these individual blessed lands would have land spirits. They were easy to defend and hard to take down. When Dong Fang Changfan lost, in order to prevent Fang Yuan from profiting, he destroyed all of his immortal Gu, to prevent his enemy from getting stronger. But there were still a lot of mortal Gu in his immortal aperture, perhaps because they were cheap, or he did not place much value in them, or maybe he lost control of them too quickly. In any case, they were all preserved in his blessed land and were not destroyed. Not speaking of the other mortal Gu, but White Lotus Giant Silkworm Gu was something Fang Yuan needed as food for cleansed soul. Fang Yuan paced in the room as he thought about it. The Northern Plains Gu immortal world was originally quite tranquil, but ever since Imperial Court Blessed Land was destroyed, it had produced huge consequences. It was like a giant tsunami. Northern Plains Gu immortals were furious. They wanted to find the culprit. But the immortal Gu that escaped from 88 True Yang building caused Northern Plains Gu immortals to fight over them intensely. It created chaos in the Northern Plains Gu immortal world. After the auction, with the rank 8 Gu immortals at the lead, the super forces discussed matters and the Northern Plains Gu immortal world was no longer as chaotic. There were new rules in place. But because of Shadow Sect, and the Central Continent Gu immortals, there were still turbulent undercurrents. Right now, with Fang Yuan's interference, a super force, Dongfang tribe, was exterminated, the tranquility of the world of Northern Plains Gu immortals was ruined once again, turbulence swept the region. Currently, countless Gu immortals from the righteous and demonic paths were fighting to seize resources in Jade Pool blessed land. It was a mess. Northern Plains situation, it could be said to truly be in shambles. In fact, ever since Imperial Court blessed land was destroyed, Northern Plains had not had a day of peace, it had thoroughly deviated from its original path. Compared with his previous life's memories, Fang Yuan had a feeling, he seemed to have accidentally broken Northern Plains. Fang Yuan took a risk just now, with some luck, he obtained the Wisdom Path inheritance. Originally, he wanted to develop himself for some time, while helping Hu immortal blessed land to survive the earthly calamity. Using the Wisdom Path inheritance, he would deduce the immortal killer move, vaguely familiar face. Based on the news he had, the current situation was quite tense, it would be best if he stayed away. But the allure of White Lotus Giant Silkworm Gu was too great. Fang Yuan knew that even though he had some methods to keep it alive, cleansed soul immortal Gu was reaching its limits from hunger, he needed to feed it White Lotus Giant Silkworm Gu. Immortal Gu are unique, but even though they are precious, cleansed soul immortal Gu is not something I cannot live without. I have self-strength immortal Gu as the core now, even if cleansed soul immortal Gu was destroyed, I would not be too greatly affected. Of course, if I could use it along with self-strength immortal Gu, the killer move Myriad Self might be able to become twice as powerful as now. Furthermore, it can even promote the growth of my soul foundation. Fang Yuan was hesitant. Although cleansed soul was good, it was not enough for him to risk his life. Immortal Gu were only tools, his life was most important. Fang Yuan was fully aware of this point from beginning to end, he would never be blinded by greed. A few days later. Northern Plains, at the place where Gu immortal Xie Shimin died. From time to time, there would be Gu immortals appearing, both righteous and demonic. After staying here for some time, they would leave, trying to find the aura of the immortal Gu in the air. Some tried to enter the blessed land that formed from Xie Shimin's immortal aperture, but they left after failing. The central continent Gu immortals were hiding far away, observing the situation, while using their divine senses to communicate. The target has not appeared yet. Since they could kill Dongfang Changfan and made many arrangements here to conceal Dongfang Changfan's blessed land, they obviously want to keep it a secret. Very likely, they want to take down this blessed land, they also know that accidents can occur over time, they will definitely return. That is not very likely by now. We have secretly stayed here for so many days, the other party might have discovered us already. With this opportunity, we might as well go to Jade Pool blessed land. Fairy Ling Mei said. Are you saying that my Black Heaven Temple's signature immortal killer move, defending day and night, cannot conceal our presence and would be seen through easily? Old man Tian Long was immediately unhappy, retorting. Fairy Ling Mei went silent, she knew that her earlier words were slightly impudent. Black Heaven Temple was one of the 10 great ancient sects, they needed to defend their reputation, their names could not be sullied. Fin the New. St. Uvels on n / velben.com. Fairy Ao Shui, who was beside Fairy Ling Mei, said, I've heard that in Jade Pool blessed land, a 10,000 Li Ji horse ran out. The meaning hidden in her words was very obvious, she was in agreement with Fairy Ling Mei's earlier suggestion, she also wanted to go to Jade Pool blessed land for its abundant resources. This trifling level of wealth can entice all of you. Don't forget why we are here. This immortal zombie is very suspicious, he has quite powerful battle strength in Strength Path, he is very likely to be immortal zombie Sha Huang. Old Lord Kenyang was hidden to the side, interjecting in this. Trifling level of wealth. You speak as if it's insignificant. Even though Dongfang tribe is inferior to our sex, it is also a superforce. Their foundation, compared to individuals like us, is much deeper. Oh, Can Yang, your harvest just now was great. The reward from Immortal Crane's sect for the mission must be very profitable. You are benefiting greatly from this yourself, but you want the rest of us to suffer losses? Isn't this too much? Chen Zhenqi spoke resentfully. He had not completed his sect's missions yet, because Feng Jiugu called him over before he had finished. The others were in similar situations. Others might be afraid of old Lord Can Yang's life chasing fire, but he was not. He was a flying grandmaster, and had the immortal killer move approaching body. Even if life chasing fire was used on him, he could escape from it. In the central continent Gu immortal world, there was a saying, Zhenqi of the Nine Heavens, followed by Fei Yan. Zhenqi of the Nine Heavens referred to Chen Zhenqi. He could spread his wings and fly into the immemorial Nine Heavens. Heaven and earth could not restrict him. The latter, followed by Fei Yan, referred to a Gu immortal of Heavenly Lotus sect, Bu Fei Yan. She was a female Gu immortal who could move agilely in the sky. She was like a wisp of smoke that could dance in the air. Right now, the female Gu immortal, Bu Fei Yan, had also come to Northern Plains. She represented Heavenly Lotus sect of the 10 great ancient sects. She was joining in the investigation of 88 Truyang buildings' collapse. At this moment, 2 flying grandmasters of the current generation were present. Chen Zhenqi spoke, but Bu Fei Yan remained silent, not saying a word. Old Oracle, however, added, Jade Pool Blessed Land was so easily taken down mainly because the rank 6 immortal Gu house, modest thatched hut, went missing mysteriously. I am not after those resources, but I have made a deduction. I deduced that clues about the culprit are in Jade Pool Blessed Land. Modest thatched hut, I would rather call it by its original name, thatched hut. Speaking of it, this Gu house was created by the late antiquity era's 3 thatched demon immortal. It used up almost all of his wealth. During his later years, he roamed Northern Plains, becoming a grand overlord for a while. 3 thatched demon immortal had a daughter. He doted on her. At that time, Dongfang tribe's Gu immortal, Dongfang Yu, and this woman were in love with each other. Thus, he left the righteous path and went into the demonic path. After 3 thatched demon immortal died, he inherited this thatched hut, killing his wife and going back to the righteous path, returning to his tribe. To get rid of his past, Dongfang Yu added in some other Gu into thatched hut, calling it modest thatched hut. Its effect did not change at all, it was just for his own reputation. Wind Cloud Manor's Gu immortal, Hong Chi Ming, spoke. Before he became an immortal, he explored Northern Plains while his cultivation level was that of a mortal. He lived there for some time. Thus, he knew about these details clearly. At this time, he mentioned this, his intention was also to go to Jade Pool Blessed Land to plunder for resources. But he did not say it, he was subtly hinting them. Alright, how much longer are we going to stay here like this? Should we go to Jade Pool Blessed Land and search for clues? Or look for that fairy Li Shan? Since she fought together with that immortal zombie, they must have a close relationship. She certainly knows many secrets. A Gu immortal was impatient. No, Fairy Li Shan paid a heavy price and left this place after obtaining Minuscule Mountain. Right now, she is hiding inside Snowy Mountain Blessed Land. That is a den of Northern Plains demonic path. If it was like in the past, it would be fine. But now, old ancestor Xuehu is trying to refine fortune rivaling heaven immortal Gu. He is overseeing matters there. Chapter 8:12, Battle of Rank 8s, Huge Commotion. Once old ancestor Xuehu was mentioned, Central Continent's immortals went silent. These people had rank 7 cultivation level, they had outstanding battle strength, near the top in their respective sections. But against a rank 8 Gu immortal, they would only lose. Even though Feng Jiugu had the ability to fight rank 8 Gu immortals, he was still rank 7 after all. Meanwhile, old ancestor Xuehu of the demonic path had terrifying battle strength. According to the intelligence that Central Continent collected, it faintly indicated that he could be the strongest rank 8 expert in Northern Plains. Just as the Central Continent Gu immortals went silent, 3 demonic path Gu immortals had concealed their appearances and stealthily entered the trap of the Central Continent Gu immortals. They went underground, going to the place where Dongfang Changfan was killed, before revealing themselves. Of these 3 Gu immortals, the one at the lead was tall, giving off a fierce aura. He had a pair of long eyebrows, he had an aquiline nose, his eyes were shining with a sharp light. His ears were not human ears, they looked like wings, shining in golden light. He was the owner of the 4th peak of Northern Plains' snowy mountain blessed land, Li Pengwang. On his left was a person shorter than him, but with a more robust and stocky body. He radiated with dominance as he gave off an icy dragon's prestige. It was the owner of the 5th peak, Demon Lord Long Dan, who was in control of Ice Lake Palace. The final Gu immortal walked on Li Pengwang's right side. His eyes were dark, he wore a white robe and had a lean body. He resembled a scholar but was less polished looking than unfettered scholar, yet he still had a grand aura. It was the owner of the 6th peak, Gong Zmo. The Central Continent Gu immortals were laying in ambush. They had outstanding methods. The 3 demonic path Gu immortals did not discover them. Their attentions were focused on what was in front of them. There was nothing in front of their eyes, but they sensed that they had found a hidden blessed land. This is the blessed land that Dongfang Changfan left behind after dying. Begin, the longer we drag things on, the more problems will occur. The blessed land that Xie Shimin left behind is near this place, W. Since they are old ancestor Xuehu's orders, we will definitely do our best and take down this blessed land. Let's begin. The 3 moved rapidly, because they had made sufficient preparations. After making some arrangements in the outside world, they tore through space and entered the blessed land. After watching the 3 of them entered, the Central Continent Gu immortals continued to use their divine senses to communicate. Amazing! Snowy Mountain blessed land's 4th, 5th, and 6th peak owners have all moved out. Snowy Mountain's first 3 peaks have immovable statuses, but the rest of them can compete for a higher position. These 3 are scheming against each other while moving together. To have them working together like this, only old ancestor Xuehu can control them. The immortal zombie did not come after all, but Snowy Mountain blessed land's members came. Should we take them down? No. These 3 immortals have extraordinary battle strength. They would combine to be higher than people like unfettered scholar, at least equivalent to any of us. Although we have more people, we lack coordination. It is easy to defeat the 3 of them, but it would be hard to kill them, and even harder to capture them. Old Lord Kenyang agreed with this as he sighed. That's right, Northern Plains is a place of constant battles. It has the highest battle strength for individuals out of the 5 regions. Each of their Gu immortals have rich battle experience, they have many unique methods, and their methods of self-preservation far surpass Central Continent. They are very sly. Earlier in Tai Chio and Jade Pool blessed land, the number of dead Gu immortals was very few. But if this was in the other 4 regions, the casualties would be 2 to 3 times as high. It is not impossible to capture them, but we will need Lord Fengjiu Gu to attack personally. A Gu immortal said. In this Northern Plains expedition, Fengjiu Ge's superior battle strength left a deep impression in the Central Continent Gu immortals' hearts. But Fengjiu Gu said, we will retreat. Saying this, without giving the immortals a chance to ask him questions, he left in an extremely secretive manner, not leaving any traces behind. The immortals looked at each other for a moment, before following his lead quietly. The group gathered somewhere far away, as the immortals asked Fengjiu Gu in confusion. Earlier, the ambush was Fengjiu Ge's idea. Now that 3 demonic path Gu immortals appeared, Fengjiu Gu was the first to leave. We have such a strong united force, are we afraid of just 3 people? Retreating without fighting, this tarnishes the reputation of our 10 great sects of Central Continent. Going to and fro, what is the meaning of it all? The Gu immortals went further and further away from Jade Pool Blessed Land, as their tones also got more unhappy, but because of Feng Jiuji's power, they did not flare up. Feng Jiugu looked around as he said some shocking news. Fairy Li Shan obtained Minuscule Mountain and had returned to Snowy Mountain Blessed Land to recuperate. I have already gotten news, a rank 8 righteous path Gu immortal of Northern Plains, Yao Huang, has already traveled to Snowy Mountain Blessed Land, to ask for Minuscule Mountain from old ancestor Shuehu. What? There is such a matter. Are the 2 rank 8s going to fight? Northern Plains is really, rank 8 Gu immortals would always only act as deterrents in Central Continent, but just for Minuscule Mountain, they are really being so active. They are truly battle maniacs. Back then, during the competition for Dang Hun Mountain, our 10 great ancient sects of Central Continent only sent disciples to compete for it. The immortals talked among themselves as their expressions changed, they were trying to absorb this shocking news. At this moment, Feng Jiugu smiled lightly, he said, that Strength Path Immortal Zombie is very vigilant. The 3 demonic path immortals of Snowy Mountain Blessed Land might be pawns to probe us, or might be the force behind him attempting to probe us. If we go after this bait, it would then be falling into a trap. We should head to Snowy Mountain Blessed Land and see if there is a chance to enter it and capture Fairy Li Shan instead. The immortals were all speechless. Fin the new. St. Uvels on n/velbin.com. Snowy Mountain Blessed Land, the strongest base of Northern Plains demonic path, it would be on a similar level compared to one of the main bases of the 10 great ancient sects of Central Continent. Feng Jiuji's boldness was overwhelming, he was actually targeting Snowy Mountain. Snowy Mountain Blessed Land, First Peak. Old ancestor Shuehu was seated on a large chair, he was holding a small mountain in his hand as he rotated it while observing it closely. This small mountain was full of cracks, it was a terrible sight. Corpses were all over the mountain, they were of many men, blood flowed everywhere, the survivors were weeping in anguish, it was a scene of misery. This was none other than Minuscule Mountain. Fairy Li Shan chased after Minuscule Mountain and fought against the Mini-Man Gu Immortal, they attracted other Gu Immortals who attacked, from both the righteous and demonic paths. After a chaotic battle, the Mini-Man Gu Immortal was almost dead, he traveled with Minuscule Mountain and moved randomly, in the end, it was captured by He Lu Lan who was at the periphery of the battlefield. He Lu Lan killed the Mini-Man Gu Immortal and defended this treasure with Fairy Li Shan, they fought their way out and went through immense danger to return to Snowy Mountain Blessed Land. This caused Minuscule Mountain to be in its current state of near destruction, the Mini-Man tribe on the mountain also faced heavy casualties. This is Minuscule Mountain. At this time, a female immortal walked out from behind. She was called Lady Wan Shou, the wife of old ancestor Shuehu, she had rank 7 cultivation level, and was one of the 4 most famous refinement path Gu immortals in Northern Plains. Once she appeared, her gaze was affixed to Minuscule Mountain, she was very interested in this legendary mountain. My wife, did you have any gains this time? Old ancestor Shuehu turned around, asking warmly as he passed Minuscule Mountain over to her. Lady Wan Shou nodded, I have already understood all the procedures to refine fortune rivaling Heaven Gu, but to familiarize myself with those steps, I still have some way to go. As she said that, she received Minuscule Mountain and observed it closely. On Minuscule Mountain, because the Mini-Man Gu Immortal had died, there was no leader left, the surviving Mini-Men were shivering in fear as they squeezed together. Monster! So scary, so scary. Don't eat me, I have too little meat, you won't be satisfied. Lady Wan Shou was beautiful and elegant, she had dazzling eyes, but in the eyes of the mini-men, she was like a huge monster. She looked terrifying. Lady Wan Shou looked at it for a while before moving her gaze away from minuscule mountain. She smiled lightly. Sister Li Shan is very lucky. She was a wood path Gu immortal who also cultivated earth path. Afterwards, because she obtained mountain pledge immortal Gu, she changed it into her core immortal Gu and became an information path Gu immortal without a solid foundation. In fact, her blessed land was still a wood path blessed land. It managed flowers and grass. Now that she has the mini-man to help her, it would be a huge advantage for her. Sister Li Shan is a member of Snowy Mountain Blessed Land. Now that minuscule mountain is in our hands, it proves that our luck is growing, we are becoming more prosperous. My wife, that is not correct. Old ancestor Xuehu shook his head. It's the opposite, this shows that our luck is declining. I want to refine fortune rivaling heaven Gu. I need to use Ma Hong Yun as the main refinement material. Thus, fortune rivaling heaven is targeting me, causing me to encounter obstacles. Look at this minuscule mountain, it is on the verge of collapsing. To fix it, I will need to pay a huge price. These are the gains of our third leader, it naturally cannot be given up, she will definitely expend a huge amount of resources on it. This will indirectly affect my plan to collect immortal materials. A man's wealth is his own ruin by stirring another's greed. Right now, she obtained minuscule mountain but it created a commotion and attracted enmity. A huge problem has arisen, the righteous path is taking action. Look, this is Yao Huang's letter. Yao Huang's letter. Lady Wan Shou was shocked, she quickly looked through the contents. In the letter, Yao Huang said, minuscule mountain was in Jade Pool blessed land, it is the possession of Dongfang tribe. Now that Dongfang tribe is exterminated, the world has been shaken. As people with the same bloodline, as descendants of giant sun immortal venerable, Yao Huang was requesting on behalf of all the righteous path forces, to negotiate with old ancestor Xuehu and return minuscule mountain to the righteous path. In the letter, Yao Huang was very courteous, but Lady Wan Shou knew that this was the righteous path's demeanor. They were always like this, even if they had huge hatred or grudges, they would act politely on the surface and keep a gentlemanly tone in their speech. Lady Wan Shou could feel Yao Huang's overbearing attitude from the letter. She looked at old ancestor Xuehu worriedly. Husband, you only have 10 or so years until the next myriad tribulation, you cannot fight easily. If anything happens during the fight and you hurt your origin core, you will lose your foundation. Even if you succeed in refining fortune rivaling heaven Gu, the losses will be greater than the gains. By the time your myriad tribulation arrives, if these losses cause you to fail. Old ancestor Xuehu laughed heartily, my wife, you are still the same. Yao Huang's letter is one of my trials, but it is also a chance, I have to make use of it and face it head on. Old ancestor Xuehu said that as he paused, his expression changed as he said resolutely, oh. He is here, it is great that he's here. Chapter 8:13, Grand Snow Power, Defeating Strong Foes. Lady Wan Shou looked up, her gaze piercing through snowy mountain blessed land towards the clear outside sky of northern plains. The sky had been clear, blue and cloudless above snowy mountain blessed land, but after Yao Huang arrived, his aura was so grand that winds and clouds swept through the sky, dyeing the sky orange and yellow. Yao Huang's voice arrived before his figure could even be seen, old friend Xuehu, I seek your understanding for visiting without prior notice. His voice resounded throughout the area, piercing into snowy mountain blessed land, causing countless snowy peaks to tremble and accumulated snow to roll down. Some snowy peaks even had small avalanches. Ha ha ha. Old ancestor Xuehu laughed heartily as he flew out of snowy mountain blessed land to the sky. The air behind him was filled with frost energy. The sky changed, one half shined with orange radiance while the other half repelled with frost energy. However, right at this moment, a wave of pitch-black ink clouds flew over from the west. The ink clouds seethed violently, quickly spreading throughout the sky. It did not lose out to old ancestor Xuehu and Yao Huang, forcefully spreading its territory in the sky. Lady Wan Shou's expression changed and her heart sank, crying out, "Why did Heavenly Lord Bai Zhu come as well?" Ink clouds, frost energy and orange radiance seethed with irresistible force as they divided the surrounding sky into 3 sections. Old ancestor Xuehu sneered, "Heavenly Lord, why are you here to join in the commotion rather than managing your force properly?" Heavenly Lord Bai Zhu coughed as he laughed dryly, "Old friend Xuehu, it is merely minuscule mountain, how can it be of interest to you? It would be better if you return it to the righteous path and prevent some trouble." Lady Wan Shou's expression turned dark, and the demonic Path Gu immortals who had stayed behind in snowy mountain-blessed land looked at the sky with stifled breaths. Heavenly Lord Bai Zhu was part of the lone cultivator faction, but after the auction, he had been preparing to establish a righteous path force. Right now, he was working together with Yao Huang, and the situation did not look good for old ancestor Xuehu who was alone. However, at the next moment, old ancestor Xuehu raised his head and laughed loudly. His valiant spirit burst out, "In that case, both of you can attack together, let's have a round of combat before any further talk." Saying so, he flew to the sky with a loud sound and directly tore open the heavenly wind chi wall, entering white heaven. Rank 8 Gu immortals had such immense and terrifying power that it was hard for the surroundings to endure their wrath. Normally, when they fought, they would tacitly agree to enter the immemorial 9 heavens to avoid causing a catastrophe to the living beings on the surface. "My friend, since you have such an interest, then I shall keep you company." Yao Huang's gaze flashed as he followed old ancestor Xuehu. Heavenly Lord Bai Zhu was dazed for a moment before giving a bitter smile, "Since old friend Xuehu is insistent, please forgive me for my following actions." The 3 rank 8 Gu immortals entered white heaven. Shortly afterwards, explosions resounded out from the sky. "The 3 have started the fight in white heaven." Someone exclaimed this among the central continent Gu immortals. They had still not reached snowy mountain-blessed land and were an immense distance afar. Right now, as they looked at the sky, they could see space churning over a vast range. Ink clouds seethed, white frost energy blew out and orange light filled the sky. The explosions were like lightning in the sky, they were never-ending and could make a listener's heart tremble. "Quick, take advantage of their fight to enter snowy mountain-blessed land." Feng Jiugu looked on with a firm gaze before rapidly withdrawing it, a sharp light flashing past his eyes. The central continent Gu immortals took deep breaths. These people were skillful and daring. After hearing Feng Jiuji's commands, they felt a long-awaited excitement and nervousness. They all increased their speed. Howl! Halfway along their route, they suddenly heard an ancient desolate beast's cry coming from the sky. The central continent Gu immortals quickly evaded it. "This is a remnant heavenly dog." The immortals stared blankly, recognizing this ancient desolate beast. Boom! The remnant heavenly dog crashed to the ground like a meteor, smashing open a huge crater. It struggled for a while before it turned motionless. Even this remnant heavenly dog was beaten out of white heaven. How can the power of rank 8s be so fierce? Just the repercussions of the battle could cause this remnant heavenly dog to die such a miserable death. Careful! The warning was just called out when hailstones started to fall down the sky. These hailstones were like the peaks of small mountains, raining down over the surroundings. Their frost energy was piercing to the bone. Countless living beings froze to death, and the central continent Gu immortals also could do nothing other than to make a detour. Crack! Suddenly, a thunderbolt struck down from the sky, brushing past the corner of Old Oracle's clothes. Old Oracle gave a miserable scream as he quickly pulled away from the dazzling lightning. Almost half of his body was gone, and he was instantly seriously injured. close to death. After a while, as the central continent Gu immortals got closer to snowy mountain-blessed land, a cold wind blew, almost as if it was blowing their souls out of their physical body. The higher the cultivation of Gu immortals, the greater the gap between each rank. There was simply a world of difference between rank 8 and rank 7, since ancient times, characters that could fight against rank 8s with rank 7 cultivation were very rare. Over these recent years, the huge central continent had one such character, Favourite Gu. The central continent Gu immortals were blown from side to side, and were just barely able to maintain their concealment, but their expressions did not look good. All these signs suggested Northern Plains rank 8 Gu immortals had battle strength that might slightly surpass that of rank 8s within Central Continent. Central Continent had many more rank 8 Gu immortals than Northern Plains. In the 5 regions, Northern Plains had the fewest rank 8 Gu immortals. This was because of the frequent battles in Northern Plains. Among the 5 regions, Northern Plains Gu immortals had the highest death rates. In Northern Plains, those that could carve out a path of blood through obstacles, standing at the peak and establishing their foothold at rank 8, were naturally not ordinary people. All of them were champions. It was impossible to merely achieve it through luck. Just the collateral damage of the battle in White Heaven could throw the Central Continent Gu immortals in an awkward predicament. Old Oracle had restored his body after narrowly escaping death, but his expression still carried disbelieving shock as he muttered, "How is this possible? I actually was not able to predict this thunderbolt." Bu Fei Yan's gaze wavered as she wondered, if she was in Old Oracle's place, could she escape that thunderbolt with her movement ability? She could not help speaking, "Are we still continuing?" Chen Zhenqi looked up at the sky, which had now become like a tattered rag which had been patched up with a soak countless times. Techniques entangled with each other as they covered areas of all sizes. Some had seething dark clouds, some had cold winds, some had thunderbolts, and some had hailstones. It was truly a scene like the end of the world. These Central Continent Gu immortals were not ordinary experts and had outstanding insight. They could see that these small areas were completely transformed by Dao marks. Some were filled with ice path Dao marks, some with lightning path Dao marks, some were of wind path, and some were of soul path. They were less than 1,000 li away from snowy mountain-blessed land, but this distance was extremely dangerous. It was filled with sinister and fatal traps. This is the gap between rank 7 and rank 8. The Dao marks in each of these single areas are more than what we have after bitter cultivation. Life and death is beyond one's control. How long has it been since I had such a feeling? Too dangerous, it's not worth throwing away our lives just to capture someone. The Central Continent Gu immortals started to announce their intentions to retreat. Only Favourite Gu remained unmoved as he kept moving ahead, his gaze calm as if he could not see the dangers around him. The Central Continent Gu immortals felt their hearts shaking when they saw Favourite Gu in this state. This guy is truly monstrous, being able to battle rank 8s with rank 7 cultivation. I could not normally sense it, but now that I think of it, Favourite Gu is truly terrifying. No, even if he can battle rank 8s, it is only for a short while. Once our identities are exposed and the 3 rank 8 Gu immortals attack us, our deaths are certain. This guy, Favourite Gu, is facing death with indifference, moving ahead boldly. I had almost forgotten his origin as a person of the demonic path. He only converted to righteous path later on. The Central Continent Gu immortals followed behind Favourite Gu, communicating the intent to retreat with their gazes, but due to their reputations and their sect's names, they could not say it out loud and wanted others to say it first. It became harder to bear with every passing minute and second. Right as they were feeling awkward, Favourite Gu, who was at the lead, suddenly stopped and held up his hand behind him. "Stop." The Gu immortals quickly stopped and saw Favourite Gu looking up with a serious expression. They followed his gaze towards the sky, where all sorts of powers were still entangling and repelling each other. The Gu immortals who had the capability to do so activated immortal killer moves to look beyond these barriers, into the scenery inside White Heaven. These Gu immortals immediately cried out in shock. Inside White Heaven, where 3 rank 8s had been fighting, there was no longer a stalemate. Instead, old ancestor Xuehu occupied the upper hand. The Grand Frost energy suppressed Yao Huang's orange radiance till it was tightly withdrawn, and made Heavenly Lord Bai Zu's ink clouds retreat. I had not expected old ancestor Xuehu to have such powerful battle strength, fighting alone against 2, yet he has already grasped victory in such a short time. Feng Jiugu heaved a sigh, his expression one of admiration and regret. Retreat. The chance was lost. He immediately flew away without hesitation. The other Gu immortals were already anxious to retreat. At this moment, they quickly retreated from this dangerous area without speaking. Heavenly Lord Bai Zu could finally endure no longer, saying, "Old friend Xue who has exquisite methods, I have learned a lot. We have lost." Yao Huang also said shortly afterwards, "The current state of northern plains is in turbulence, old friend Xuehu, now is not the time to determine the winner and the loser. Since you have your sights on minuscule mountain, we can forget my previous suggestion. Until we meet again." Yao Huang was still bent on defending his reputation. Old ancestor Xuehu laughed loudly and said with an unforgiving tone, "The 2 of you want to come and go as you please, what do you take me for?" When he finished speaking, heaven and earth started to tremor, the ground quaked and mountains shook. Endless frost energy descended, sweeping away all obstacles. The sky became clear with no more cold wind and thunderstorms. In a huge surrounding range, the ground was instantly covered with a layer of ice and snow. The temperature rapidly descended, the ground was frozen as if northern plains had returned to the cold winter from the warm spring. Boom! 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 3 explosions resounded from the sky. Echoes rumbled throughout the world, deafening like a lord of thunder shouting beside one's ears. The concealment of the central continent Gu immortals lifted from this attack and their bodies staggered. Besides Feng Jiugu, everyone's ears were bleeding, their eardrums had broken. "Leave, leave quickly." All color drained away from the Gu immortals' faces, the battle intent inside them fell to the abyss as they only concentrated on flying away. There was also a large earthquake in snowy mountain-blessed land. Primeval energy fluctuated rapidly, and the Gu immortals inside shivered as both their bodies and minds suffered intense shocks. After a long while, the ground gradually stabilized. 6 mountain peaks of snowy mountain-blessed land were half destroyed, there were enormous fissures in the ground, and countless resources planted and stored in the blessed land were destroyed. However, snowy mountain-blessed land's Gu immortals were flushed red with excitement, their eyes shining brightly. They looked far away where a tall male figure descended slowly from the sky. Old ancestor Xuehu. From above him, pure white crystal clear powder was spreading with the wind. Feng Jiugu looked back at this sight, his pupils dilated as he muttered, "Split heaven powder, even white heaven was split." Snowy mountain-blessed land's Gu immortals, however, were ecstatic as they flew out of the blessed land and made greetings. F0 Lo Nu. Hapters at nov/el/bin/.com. This subordinate welcomes old ancestor. Now, the debate of who the strongest rank 8 of Northern Plains is, has been settled. Old ancestor has endless power, the greatest in Northern Plains. Yao Huang and Heavenly Lord Bai Zu had to retreat with their tails tucked between their legs. The demonic path Gu immortals stopped one after the other in the air, and only Lady Wan Shou moved closer. "Dear." She spoke warmly with a proud expression which also contained worry. "Rest assured, I have my reservations, but Heavenly Lord Baizu and Yao Huang also have their own concerns. These two were coveting fortune rivaling heaven and did not want me to successfully refine it. I defeated both of them, now let's see who in Northern Plains has the guts to disturb my work. Old Ancestor Shuehu chuckled and continued, it is just that I tore open the sky to white heaven above, and have to trouble you to repair it. Otherwise, desolate beasts and ancient desolate beasts will descend from the crack. Although they are of no threat, they will be a persistent bother. Lady Wan Shou relaxed after confirming her husband was all right. She poked at old Ancestor Shuehu's broad chest and said with a helpless tone, "Oh you." Chapter 8:14, Clarifying the Situation, New Transaction. Old Ancestor Shuehu fought two enemies by himself, defeating the collaboration of Yao Huang and Heavenly Lord Baizu. This battle shook Northern Plains. Information spread like the wind, the entire Northern Plains Gu immortal world went into chaos because of it. Furthermore, because the Central Continent Gu immortals saw this firsthand, information entered Central Continent, alerting many leaders of the 10 great ancient sects of Central Continent. They quickly engraved old Ancestor Shuehu's name deeply in their minds. A few days later. Central Continent, Hu immortal blessed land. Fairy Li Shan and He Lu Lan visited, bringing first-hand information with them. Fang Yuan held this information path mortal Gu as he shut his eyes, it was as if he was in snowy mountain blessed land, he was viewing from Fairy Li Shan's perspective. In the sky, the sight of the 3 rank 8 great experts fighting could be seen. From start to finish, their moves were grand and majestic, his mind was in a daze as he watched. Even though the distance was great, and the 3 were fighting far away in white heaven, but just from the naked eye, one could feel the imposing power of the rank 8s. Among Gu immortals, the higher the cultivation, the greater the difference. Between rank 6 and 7, there are some elites that can fight rank 7s occasionally. Between rank 7 and 8, the difference is immense, like the distance between the sky and earth. To fight rank 8s with rank 7 cultivation level, in the entirety of human history, it was extremely rare. By rank 9, one's own strength could dominate the world, there are no opponents left, one is invincible, the strongest in heaven and earth. Rank 8 Gu immortals are not a rank 9's match, they would always lose terribly, there had never been an exception. Looking over this scenery 3 times, Fang Yuan returned the Gu worm to Fairy Li Shan, his eyes became clear when he opened them. Fang Yuan had already anticipated old Ancestor Shuehu's great power, in his previous life's memories, Central Continent had lost several huge battles because of him, he even killed some rank 8s from Central Continent. This time, by observing the battle personally, Fang Yuan had gained a deeper understanding of Northern Plains' situation. Northern Plains' righteous path has 2 rank 8 Gu immortals, they are Yao Huang and Prince Feng Xian. In terms of reputation, Yao Huang has the highest in the righteous path, while Prince Feng Xian is related to Central Continent, he is the biggest spy that Central Continent has hidden in Northern Plains. 88 Truyang building collapsed, Imperial Court blessed land was destroyed, Northern Plains is in turbulence, the arrangements that Giant Sun Immortal Venerable had made painstakingly were destroyed. With the breakdown of established customs and the competition for immortal Gu, the righteous and demonic paths went into intense battles, new hatred overlapped on old grudges one after another. Even though Qin Baixing held the auction, the immortals are only busy processing their gains currently, after a short while, their conflicts are only going to escalate. From Imperial Court blessed land destruction, Northern Plains' righteous path suffered the most, while the demonic path actually had great benefits. All along, Giant Sun Immortal Venerable's arrangements had been to establish his goal of a hereditary monarchy. The righteous path of Northern Plains is also the Huang Jin bloodline, they suppressed the demonic path and lone cultivators greatly. Now that 88 Truyang building collapsed, the demonic path and lone cultivators have lost a large amount of pressure on them. Be it in my previous life or this current life, Heavenly Lord Baizu only created his super force after Imperial Court Blessed Land was destroyed. He is a rank 8 Gu immortal, but he does not have the Huang Jin bloodline, even he is afraid of the combined pressure from all of the Huang Jin bloodline super forces. Heavenly Lord Baizu wants to establish a righteous force. He needs a good relationship with Yao Huang and the others, while steering clear of the demonic path. He needs to show proof of where he stands. Thus, when Yao Huang demanded minuscule mountain, he had to go with him. But he did not expect that old ancestor Shui, who would be so fierce, actually defeating the combination of him and Yao Huang. To old ancestor Shui, who, refining the rank 8 fortune rivaling heaven immortal Gu is extremely eye-catching, countless people are coveting it. None of the righteous path forces want him to succeed. Especially after the collapse of 88 True Yang building, the righteous forces are even more suspicious and wary of the demonic path. They are afraid of them rising up. But old ancestor Shui, who needs a lot of resources to refine fortune rivaling heaven immortal Gu. He sent his demonic path Gu immortals all over the place to collect immortal materials. This caused many conflicts to occur, and it would only continue to escalate, creating more animosity and obstacles. Old ancestor Shui, who decided to fight just now, his greatest motive was to send a wave of deterrence over the northern plains Gu immortal world, to clear the obstacles for refining fortune rivaling heaven immortal Gu. Northern Plains situation was originally gloomy with many undercurrents. It was like a volcano ready to explode. Now that old ancestor Shui, who had defeated both Yao Huang and Heavenly Lord Baizu at the same time, it would have a huge impact. He simply swept away the obstacles ahead of him, skipping past the point of a large-scale battle between the righteous path and demonic path, bringing the demonic path into a position of great strength, pressuring the righteous path. In the following days, the demonic path in Northern Plains Gu immortal world will be overbearing, while the righteous path will be lowering their heads. This is the aftermath of this battle. It affected the entire region. Fang Yuan was old and wise, he could see the situation clearly. F0 Lo Nu. Hapters at nov/el/bin/.com. Rank 6s, although they had surpassed the mortal realm, they are only the bottom tier of Gu immortals. Rank 7s are the main pillars of strength. Rank 8s usually did not move rashly. Each of their actions, even if unintended, would cause huge repercussions and influence. For any series of events, each rank 8 Gu immortal was a trendsetter. Rank 6 and rank 7 can only follow the main flow of events. When can I also become such an important character? A person who can dictate the flow. Fang Yuan could not help but think of this. Alright, Fang Yuan, we are here this time to bring what you needed to complete the transaction. Now, I am passing it all to you. Fairy Li Shan spoke. She brought Fang Yuan a group of White Lotus Giant Silkworm Gu and a large number of Star Thought Gu. As it turned out, Snowy Mountain Blessed Land knew about the location of Dong Fang Chang Fan's Blessed Land after he died because Fang Yuan provided them the details. Dong Fang Chang Fan had undergone possession and been restored to life. Since he had just become an immortal, no matter how high-grade his immortal aperture was, there would be few resources inside. After Dong Fang Chang Fan died, the Blessed Land was formed as a whole entity. In terms of defense, it was far superior to a public Blessed Land. If a land spirit was formed, it might be filled with hatred towards Fang Yuan, or have an obsession of taking revenge on Fang Yuan. In addition, considering the force that was investigating Fang Yuan's background, he did not want to risk his own life just for cleanse soul immortal Gu. Thus, through Fairy Li Shan, he borrowed Snowy Mountain's forces to achieve his goals. The value of a blessed land was immense. Fairy Li Shan and Fang Yuan had an agreement. Fang Yuan would provide the information and tell her the location of the blessed land, basically giving this blessed land to Fairy Li Shan. In return, he wanted the White Lotus Giant Silkworm Gu inside, as well as the ordinary star-thought mortal Gu. As for the immortal Gu, Fang Yuan had already learned from Dong Fang Changfan's soul that they had all self-detonated. Fang Yuan obtained the White Lotus giant silkworm Gu and controlled his joy. After seeing the huge amount of star-thought Gu, over 50,000 of them, he could not conceal the joy inside him any longer, it showed in his eyes. These 50,000 star-thought Gu simply came at such an appropriate time. It was truly timely assistance. Fairy Li Shan observed his expression and coughed, saying, "Congratulations Fang Yuan, right now, you gained the most from Dong Fang tribe's destruction. After all, you obtained Dong Fang Changfan's soul, this is not just a complete wisdom path inheritance. Dong Fang Changfan's secrets in managing blessed lands have immense value. Moreover, you had obtained many resources inside Jade Pool blessed land as well." As Fairy Li Shan said this, she did not conceal her envy. Because the Snowy Mountain Alliance was not over yet, members of the alliance had to speak the truth. Fang Yuan did not conceal anything of the matter of obtaining Dong Fang Changfan's soul. He could not hide it anyway. There were many traces and clues left that could deduce the truth. Fang Yuan decided to simply inform Fairy Li Shan and He Lu Lan without hiding anything. At this moment, he said, "Fairy, you obtained Minuscule Mountain, that is an item recorded inside the Legends of Renzu, its value is not inferior to what I obtained. You do not need to speak such flattery, you have Dang Hun Mountain, you do not need Minuscule Mountain. Hehe, we all know inside ourselves that you are the biggest winner of this. Moreover, about Minuscule Mountain." Fairy Li Shan smiled bitterly, "I am here to ask you a favor, I am here to ask for help." Fang Yuan's expression turned solemn, "I am listening." It turned out that Fairy Li Shan and Dong Fang tribe had made an agreement, as allies, they could not attack each other. But to fight for Minuscule Mountain, Fairy Li Shan went back on this agreement during the process. Although Fairy Li Shan only went into information path a while after becoming a Gu immortal, she had made preparations in case she had no choice but to go against the agreement. She had asked someone to use a time path immortal killer move on her. The effect of this time path killer move was to allow Fairy Li Shan to break the alliance agreement. The backlash and damage from it would be stalled for a period of time before activating. Minuscule Mountain's Mini-Man tribe were only allies with Dong Fang Changfan, they did not belong to Dong Fang tribe. Despite this, the backlash of breaking the agreement was still very severe. Fairy Li Shan was originally heavily injured, she was not confident of enduring this backlash. Thus, He Lu Lan thought of a good idea for Fairy Li Shan. Initially, Fairy Li Shan and Dong Fang Changfan made the agreement using Mountain Pledge Gu, they had used Minuscule Mountain for it. If Minuscule Mountain was destroyed, the agreement would fail, there would be no backlash. But if Minuscule Mountain was destroyed, He Lu Lan and Fairy Li Shan's risk would have been for nothing, that was not an acceptable solution. He Lu Lan's idea was, after Minuscule Mountain was destroyed, when the time path killer move's effect wears off, after the backlash is over, they would ask Tai Bai Yunsheng to use landscape as before to heal the mountain. By then, Minuscule Mountain would be back to its original state, even though Fairy Li Shan still would have the agreement with Dong Fang tribe, as long as she did not break it again, it would be fine. Fairy Li Shan would be able to avoid the backlash of the agreement while fixing Minuscule Mountain. As to why they had to ask Fang Yuan, that was because Fairy Li Shan and He Lu Lan knew that between Fang Yuan and Tai Bai Yunsheng, Fang Yuan was the leader. Fang Yuan smiled, he agreed, "This is a great idea, I am willing to help. As for the payment, we can discuss it in detail." Fairy Li Shan saw Fang Yuan smile and her heart sank, she thought, here it comes. She knew how ruthless Fang Yuan was, she was definitely going to suffer a huge loss here, she smiled bitterly as she nodded. He Lu Lan who was beside her seemed prepared, she spoke now, "Fang Yuan, if I am not wrong, your Hu immortal blessed land is about to undergo its earthly calamity, right? How about this, I will stay here to defend Hu immortal blessed land and resist the calamity. It can be the payment for asking Tai Bai Yunxing to heal minuscule mountain, how about that? Chapter 8:15, Time Assist Luck, Delay, Zhou Yi Zi. Fang Yuan was a shrewd person, he immediately shook his head, the value of these two services is not equivalent at all. For you too, Tai Bai Yunxing's landscape as before is a necessity. In my case, I can fully undergo the earthly calamity alone. Furthermore, old ancestor Shui who is currently staying in Snowy Mountain Blessed Land now, and you, He Lu Lan, are not a member of Snowy Mountain Blessed Land, you are an outsider, you cannot stay there anymore. Using the excuse of the earthly calamity, you can hide inside my Hu immortal Blessed Land, I have not even asked you for rent yet, but you actually want to use this as the payment for Tai Bai Yunxing's help. Fang Yuan exposed He Lu Lan's awkward position. He Lu Lan was unabashed, she laughed, continuing to argue with Fang Yuan. The two sparred verbally, until a while later, they came to an agreement. He Lu Lan would stay in Fang Yuan's place for the time being, contributing strength qi without any compensation. The guts Gu produced during this period would not have He Lu Lan's share. At the same time, when Hu immortal blessed land faces the earthly calamity, He Lu Lan would need to help and defend it alongside Fang Yuan. After this transaction was completed, Fairy Li Shan was not anxious to leave, she talked to Fang Yuan regarding immortal materials. Fang Yuan obtained countless immortal materials in the auction. Fairy Li Shan wanted to buy them to deal with old ancestor Shui whose mission of obtaining immortal materials. After Fairy Li Shan obtained minuscule mountain, old ancestor Shui who only borrowed it to have a look, he did not take it from her. After old ancestor Shui who defeated the two rank 8s, Snowy Mountain Blessed Land status rose rapidly, its reputation had soared to an unprecedented peak. Old ancestor Shui who summoned Fairy Li Shan, using the reason that he had acted to protect minuscule mountain from Yao Huang, he requested for her to increase her contributions, he gave her many missions to collect immortal materials. Fairy Li Shan's current state was very awkward, she had just obtained minuscule mountain, even though she asked Tai Bai Yunxing for help to heal minuscule mountain and saved a huge cost, she was still very heavily injured. Originally, she had a lot of savings due to Mountain Pledge Gu, she was quite affluent. But by funding He Lu Lan intensively, her savings were slowly depleted, and at this point, she was running dry. The cultivation of one person expended countless resources, it was not easy. Many Gu immortals did not have a steady source of revenue, their income did not match their expenses, they could only offer their services and travel everywhere. Even if they had a source of revenue, there were often earnings and losses in trading. Things like Mountain Pledge Gu and the Guts Gu trade were very rare and unique, how could theirs be so widely demanded? Most importantly, there were heavenly tribulations and earthly calamities, each time they occurred, a lot of resources and hard work would be destroyed. Even if the Gu immortals survive the heavenly tribulation or earthly calamity, when they see their immortal aperture in bad shape, they would feel a strong sense of dejection. Fairy Li Shan was very bold, other than supporting herself, she even helped He Lu Lan. He Lu Lan did not have a source of revenue, the two of them had huge needs for cultivation, she was providing for them both. But no matter how great her resolve was, her finances were starting to dwindle. Other than material objects like immortal essence stones and immortal materials, Fairy Li Shan still had a lot of other things. Many precious pieces of information were very valuable. Fairy Li Shan had a huge network, she was a top-tier information collector. Fang Yuan's immortal materials were meant to be used in the refinement path convention, but he had a huge quantity of them, it was fine to sell some to her. Fang Yuan nodded, but he requested for an immortal killer move from Fairy Li Shan. He had been wanting this immortal killer move for ages, right now was the chance to extort it, Fang Yuan had to make good use of the chance. Fairy Li Shan heard Fang Yuan's request and knew it was coming. She felt extremely bitter. But circumstances were stronger than people. Even if Fairy Li Shan did not want to, what could she do? Time Assist Luck. This was the name of the immortal killer move that Fang Yuan requested from Fairy Li Shan. This immortal killer move used Time Luck Immortal Gu as the core, to steal other people's lifespan and boost the luck of oneself temporarily. Fang Yuan had obtained Time Luck Immortal Gu from Fairy Li Shan earlier. He had wanted to use Inch of Time Gu in place of lifespan to activate Time Luck Immortal Gu, but the result was failure. Inch of Time and Time Luck Immortal Gu, although they could be used together, the former was expended too intensively. Later, Fang Yuan wanted to deduce an immortal killer move to reduce the expenditure of Inch of Time Gu. But he still failed. Although he could use the light of wisdom and gain unlimited inspiration, he had too few thoughts in his mind. It was not enough. Memory Thought Gu and Malicious Thought Gu were still being refined, but the expenditure was greater than the production. He had little in storage. Even if he had enough thoughts, Fang Yuan's time path attainment level was too low. There was little hope of getting any success. But Fang Yuan knew that Fairy Li Shan had such an immortal killer move from the start. It used Time Luck Immortal Gu as the core. If he could use it well, it was a source of revenue not inferior to Mountain Pledge Gu. Thus, Fang Yuan used this extremely rare opportunity to ask for this immortal killer move. After obtaining it, he checked it and felt some curiosity. He asked Fairy Li Shan, "Where did you get this killer move from?" "I am unable to answer that." Fairy Li Shan's expression was cold, her mood was terrible. Fang Yuan was taking advantage of the situation, but she had to ask him for help. She could only give in. The concept of this killer move is very familiar. Is it from a lone cultivator of northern plains, Zhou Yizi? This person was very famous during the Five Regions Chaotic War. He was originally a secluded cultivator that did not bother with worldly affairs, but when Northern Plains and Central Continent Gu immortals fought a huge battle, the battle went to the area he was staying in, causing him to rage and instantly capture 3 Gu immortals on the spot. Northern Plains asked him to fight. He refused, but because they were on the same side, he used a time path killer move on the Northern Plains Gu immortals, to protect their lives. This killer move had a weird name. It was very short, only one word. Not long after, it spread across the 5 regions, and Fang Yuan had heard of its famed name in his previous life. It was called delay. The effect of the killer move was to delay damage, leaving some time for the Gu immortals to find ways to heal themselves. For example, a Gu immortal who had delay used on him would not die from a fatal blow. The damage would be delayed for a time period before taking effect. Thus, the Gu immortal would have a chance to seek help. During this period, the Gu immortal can escape to get some time to recuperate and save himself. He can also fly to his ally and seek help. If it was a certain death situation, he could pass his cultivation resources to his descendants in the tribe, and place his blessed land in a secluded spot to not give his enemies any advantage. Even though Northern Plains Gu immortals had great battle strength, their numbers were fewer than those of Central Continent. Central Continent made the first moves. They formed arrangements and killed a batch of Northern Plains Gu immortals first, causing Northern Plains to be at a disadvantage, facing defeat time after time. But the appearance of delay reduced Northern Plains casualties greatly. It affected the battle situation to a large extent. In the end, Northern Plains and Central Continent were in a deadlock. Central Continent's plan of attacking and taking down Northern Plains rapidly was destroyed. If it really is Zhou Yizi, then Fairy Li Shan's ability to delay the damage of the alliance agreement would be the killer move delay. I really cannot ignore Fairy Li Shan's connections. She could actually get this lone cultivator to help. I wonder what price she paid. Fang Yuan felt that this guess was quite probable. Among Gu immortals, there were many who hid their presence. They did not travel around, battle, or attend gatherings, they usually stayed in seclusion and cultivated. Many people would be unknown to the world after their deaths, even if they had astonishing achievements. For example, the owner of Starry Sky Grotto Heaven, when he was alive, he concealed himself very deeply and did not have much of a reputation. Only until Starry Sky Grotto Heaven was exposed, did his high cultivation level get revealed. There were quite a number of such Gu immortals. They were present among rank 6, rank 7, and even rank 8. At least, Fang Yuan knew that there were more than 5 rank 8 Gu immortals in northern plains, only that they were hiding themselves. Fang Yuan also thought about Purple Mountain True Monarch. This mysterious Gu immortal did not show himself even once during the 5 regions' chaotic war. He could not but be moved, thinking to himself, countless streams flow into rivers, there is simply no end to the number of heroes and champions in this world. From start to finish, Fairy Li Shan did not expose any information regarding Zhou Yizi. This transaction, even though she paid a high price, was still successful. She had reached her goal. Fairy Li Shan brought the immortal materials back to Snowy Mountain Blessed Land. For the following period of time, she was going to recuperate from her injuries, and resolve the issue of the alliance agreement. She also had to find out about methods to raise many men, to gain the most benefits in the shortest possible time. Meanwhile, He Lu Lan stayed behind. Follow. /VELB/in.com. Fang Yuan brought her along as they flew. In a short while, they reached their destination. The two looked down from above. They saw that on the ground that was lush and green with vegetation, there were 3 humongous black-gray structures. These were the 3 stone nests in Hu Immortal Blessed Land. The stone nests had countless rooms inside. Each room had at least one hairy man. They were refining Gu constantly, in an orderly fashion. This was the idea of a production line that was borrowed from Earth, resulting in a huge Gu refinement base that was created. Splitting the refinement procedure of a Gu worm into dozens of steps, or even hundreds, and making each hairy man in charge of each step. Not only could the Gu recipe be kept as a secret, the familiarity of the hairy man will be higher, the success rate and quantity of the Gu refinement would be higher. In the stone nests, air sac Gu were being produced. Of course, there were explosions in the stone nests. They could be both mild or serious. Fire could even break out, as the hairy men were engulfed in flames, crying in pain. But the screams and cries would not travel to other rooms and interfere with the refinement from the other hairy men. Each room had perfect soundproofing methods. Not only were disturbances minimized, the hairy men were also prevented from communicating. This made them easier to control. They had no choice but to refine Gu. Gu refinement carried risks. In fact, it was of similar danger to fighting. Once explosions occurred due to accidents, the room would be filled with Gu worms that spat out water to eliminate the fire, or to heal the injuries. When Gu refinement failed, the hairy men which suffered backlashes would be lucky if they survived. The price for failure in some cases was death. In other cases, their brains might wither, they might go crazy, they might become handicapped, unable to refine Gu anymore. Fang Yuan would heal mild injuries. But if they were heavily injured and became vegetables, the price for treating them would be too great. Fang Yuan would abandon and euthanize them. Chapter 8:16, Hairy Men, White Silkworm, 2 Tough Questions. Gu were the essence of heaven and earth. Mortal Gu contained a trace of law fragments of the Great Tao, while immortal Gu were fragments of the Great Tao. Gu refinement involved the fusion and interaction of the laws of the Great Tao. It was even more mystical than chemistry, and even more dangerous than processing gunpowder. Fang Yuan was in the air. He observed for a while. More than 10 hairy men had failed Gu refinement. They suffered injuries, a few of them died on the spot. He could not help but sigh inwardly. as my production expands, the loss of hairy men is becoming a bigger issue. Hairy man slaves were most expensive among slaves, they were even more expensive than human Gu masters. This might be quite shocking. How could the price of humans be lower than mere hairy men? The answer was simple: humans were the spirit of living beings, the human mind was fickle, they were not easy to control. Variant humans were comparatively more simple-minded. Fang Yuan could control so many hairy men, making them refine Gu all day long, only giving them time to eat and sleep, with none allocated to leisure. If these hairy men were human Gu masters, this life would be impossible. If human Gu masters engaged in such strenuous activities for an extended period without rest or entertainment, they would feel extremely angry and hateful, they would attempt to resist. The arrangement of the stone nest was very simple, it could not block the intelligence of humans. They would definitely cause destruction secretly, and communicate with each other. When the time was ripe, they would resist by protesting, or directly revolt using their own strength. Thus, Fang Yuan chose to buy hairy men slaves which were most expensive, rather than placing his attention on human Gu masters. This was also one of the reasons why Fairy Li Shan desperately wanted Minuscule Mountain. It was not just because of the Gu refinement materials in Minuscule Mountain, but also because it was the base of a mini-man tribe. Controlling this tribe would grant her great benefits. Otherwise, the old and sly Dong Fong Chang Fan would not have signed an agreement with the mini-man tribe. In the past, I could not feel the loss of hairy men, that was because the scale was still small. Now that I have 3 stone nests, and with the Gu refinement processes becoming tougher, the effect is becoming evident. If this goes on, a problem will arise if I do not create a solution. Fang Yuan was trying to think of a way. At this moment, He Lu Lan also advised, Fang Yuan, your loss of hairy men is a bit high. In a month, you lose at least 100 hairy men. It is quite costly if we think about it. If you can reduce this number, our cost would lower, and the profit of Guts Gu would be higher. If she was not roped into the Guts Gu trade, she would not have said it. But now that the Guts Gu trade also involved He Lu Lan's interests, she had to mention it when she saw a problem. Fang Yuan nodded. There are 2 ways to solve this problem. One is to modify the Gu recipe and reduce the risk. By further splitting up and simplifying the steps, I can make every step safer, and have a higher chance of success. The second method is to raise my own hairy man tribe. I would not need to purchase them at a high price. He Lu Lan shook her head. The first method is too difficult. Gu recipes are usually the result of countless improvements. To diversify the steps on this basis and modify the recipe, it is too difficult. The effort and resources needed to undergo experiments will be a huge sum. She did not think well of modifying the Gu recipe. What she did not know was, Fang Yuan had wisdom Gu. Even though he could not activate it, the light of wisdom could give him unlimited inspiration. To Fang Yuan, the difficulty in modifying the recipe was about whether he had enough thoughts in his mind to expend. Fang Yuan would obviously not say this out loud. He spoke without changing his expression. The second method is just as hard. I do not have any methods of raising hairy men. The ones sold in the market are usually male hairy men, very few females and children are sold. This is also to prevent other Gu immortals from raising them. Raising hairy men, a variant human, was much more difficult than raising wild beasts and plants. Upt. TED Chapters. NN. Velbin.com. Countries were hard to manage, that was because the citizens had wisdom. Even though this was on a larger scale, the logic remained the same. The more wisdom they had, the harder they were to control. The hairy men would know how to rebel, they would find loopholes and create problems on a large scale. Fang Yuan knew clearly, with his current foundation, he would definitely lose everything he invested if he raised hairy men. His previous life's memories could not help him here. He vaguely remembered, from his life back on Earth. He raised goldfish, he did not change the water or give them oxygen, he only knew how to feed them food. In 3 days, one died, and in half a month, all his goldfish died. Raising hairy men was obviously harder than goldfish. The nature of hairy men, their living habitats, all these needed to be considered. It was a huge field to study. Fang Yuan had raised rockmen before. In fact, the rockman tribe in whose immortal blessed land was still quite large. But that was because of Daoist Gu. It could raise the soul foundation of the rockmen and cause them to rapidly reproduce, providing future generations. This was clearly a cheat method, if Fang Yuan had to raise these rockmen normally. Hee. In 2 to 3 years, no matter how many rockmen he started with, they would go extinct. Of course, he could buy knowledge in raising hairy men from other Gu immortals. Back then, when Fang Yuan wanted to grow the star fragment grass, he bought some planting insights. But the difference in value between the two was immense. To buy the knowledge of raising hairy men, the price to pay would be extremely heavy. Like on Earth, acquisition of an enterprise in the top 100 would involve a huge amount of funds. Even if Fang Yuan stored up all of his profits starting from now, with his speed of profit generation, he would need to accumulate them for many years to get enough. Right now, I have about 20 to 30 immortal essence stones in my storage. Even though I obtained the dragon fish, regretful spiders, and eerie fire dragon pythons, and I even obtained the method to raise them from Dong Fang Chang Fan's soul, but I need to invest and build the structures. Even if I finish building them, I cannot sell these resources directly into Treasure Yellow Heaven. I need to find other avenues. After all, I cannot stand in the limelight now. Fang Yuan smiled bitterly inwardly. All in all, his future prospects were bright, but his current circumstances were in an awkward place. Fang Yuan shrugged off the random thoughts in his mind. He said to He Lu Lan, "All right, I have already told Little Who Immortal and made the arrangements. I won't be sending you off. For the following period of time, you can stay in the stone nest. I have already given orders. Right now the 3 stone nests are refining air sac Gu. Do assist them. When the earthly calamity arrives, I will call you if I need your help." He Lu Lan felt something amiss when she heard that. From Fang Yuan's tone, he was treating her as a laborer. Fang Yuan saw her ugly expression and did not react. He pretended not to see it. If he did not squeeze out all of He Lu Lan's value, would that be his style? After settling He Lu Lan's matters, Fang Yuan returned to Dang Hun Palace. Opening the hidden door, he entered the secret room. He saw Dong Fang Chang Fan's soul again. His soul was extremely weak, being sealed here. Even though he saw Fang Yuan, he could not move. Fang Yuan intentionally weakened him, resulting in Dong Fang Chang Fan's soul being very weak. Fang Yuan did not dare to be careless. To an old fox like this, he was very vigilant. But to search his soul again, he needed to replenish it first. Thus, Fang Yuan broke some air sac Gu, using Daoist Gu on Dong Fang Chang Fan's soul. His soul rapidly recovered. In the blink of an eye, it was half healed. Fang Yuan stretched out his monstrous claw, grabbing the soul and searching it. Dong Fang Chang Fan did not resist it at all. Fang Yuan had already searched his soul thoroughly. He had no secrets left in front of Fang Yuan. It was as if he resigned himself to fate. He had lost his heart. A legendary character, falling into such a state, it was quite pitiful. Fang Yuan was vigilant regardless. After searching the soul, he inspected all of the Gu worms he set up in this room to prevent any accidents from occurring. Dong Fang Chang Fan's soul did not even have a tiny bit of hope left. All these movements were observed by Dong Fang Chang Fan's soul. He inwardly felt a freezing chill. Why did he end up in the hands of such a person? There was no way out. This was a dead end. He had no methods left. As he despaired, he felt a peculiar sense of admiration. In Fang Yuan, Dong Fang Chang Fan could almost see himself. Fang Yuan left the secret room, closing the hidden door. He inspected the door again and ensured that there were no issues before returning to the main hall. He sat on the bed, star thoughts were moving in his mind as he fell into deep thought. Dong Fang Chang Fan no longer had any secrets, he was squeezed dry. But Fang Yuan kept him around. It was a possible card for use in a future scheme to obtain Minuscule Mountain. Right now, Minuscule Mountain was owned by Fairy Li Shan, but because of the Snowy Mountain Alliance, Fang Yuan could not snatch it. But the alliance agreement was not impossible to circumvent, like Fairy Li Shan's Time Path Killer move that could delay the damage of breaking the agreement. In addition, the Snowy Mountain Alliance had a time limit. Dong Fang Chang Fan Minuscule Mountain had an agreement. From Dong Fang Chang Fan, Fang Yuan learned that the agreement was made with Mountain Pledge Gu using Minuscule Mountain. The agreement was not just between Dong Fang Chang Fan and the Miniman Gu Immortal, but was made with Dong Fang Tribe and the Miniman Tribe. Fairy Li Shan was definitely going to raise the Miniman Tribe, and make use of them. With this, Dong Fang Chang Fan's soul still had some use, it was an effective weapon. But this effective weapon could not be used at this point, and he might perhaps not get a chance to use it in the future. But Fang Yuan kept this as a secret, it was a casual move, he would rather keep it prepared it just in case. He was thinking about the White Lotus Giant Silkworm Gu now. This time, he searched Dong Fang Chang Fan's soul for information about White Lotus Giant Silkworm Gu. Cleansed Soul Immortal Gu needed the flesh of more than 10,000 White Lotus Giant Silkworm Gu each time it was fed. What Fang Yuan obtained was less than this amount. He had inspected and confirmed once again that Dong Fang Chang Fan's White Lotus Giant Silkworm Gu were only an unexpected benefit. That place was a natural cave and was created in a mystical way by nature, it was an environment that was suitable for White Lotus Giant Silkworm Gu to live. Furthermore, Dong Fang Chang Fan captured all of these Gu worms, he did not leave any behind. A large portion of them were used in the Phantom Formation, they played a critical role. The remaining portion that was not used was now in Fang Yuan's hands. Right now, Fang Yuan had two choices. One was to use the limited White Lotus Giant Silkworm Gu and undergo experimentation, reverse refining its recipe or even trying to obtain the method to raise White Lotus Giant Silkworm Gu. If this method worked, he would have an unceasing source of White Lotus Giant Silkworm Gu. But if this fails, and all of the White Lotus Giant Silkworm Gu were consumed in the experiments, Cleansed Soul Immortal Gu would die of hunger, there would definitely be not enough White Lotus Giant Silkworm Gu left to feed it. The other method was to feed it now. To leave aside the experiments or the long-term advantages. In this case, the White Lotus Giant Silkworm Gu were still insufficient, but it would allow Cleansed Soul Immortal Gu to become less hungry, no longer under the threat of dying for now. Fang Yuan still had some hope that Dong Fang Chang Fan might have a place to obtain White Lotus Giant Silkworm Gu, so that he could get a number of them. But this soul search ruined his wishful thoughts. After thinking about it for a while, Fang Yuan opened his eyes, making up his mind. Chapter 8:17, Great Tool for Deduction, Star Thoughts. Never mind. I should play it safe and use these for feeding. Cleansed Soul Immortal Gu is already starving to its limits, it is very weak now, if I do not feed it and drag this on, it will die. As for the next feeding session, I can only place hope in the future. Fang Yuan was of the demonic path, he liked to take risks, but he did not take them blindly. He always assessed the benefits and risks. Having a mentality of leaving things to chance and thinking one's own luck is good, to put up stakes on chances that are low, the cruelty of reality would teach them a lesson until they suffer greatly and end up full of bruises. Cleansed Soul Immortal Gu was in Fang Yuan's immortal aperture. It was the size of a grown-up's fist, it was like a tadpole, its body was gray-white and dry, it was sprawled on the ground, not moving at all. Fang Yuan willed and used his Gu to dissect the White Lotus giant silkworm Gu, retrieving the meat and placing it in front of Clean's Soul Immortal Gu. Clean's Soul Immortal Gu's body shook, but it did not have any strength to crawl to the food. Fang Yuan could only place Clean's Soul Immortal Gu on the meat. Clean's Soul Immortal Gu moved about before calming down, slowly sucking the blood in the meat quietly. After a while, the blood entered its stomach and it regained a bit of strength. It opened its mouth and started to eat the White Lotus giant silkworm Gu's tender flesh. The more it ate, the more its dry body inflated like a balloon, it became chubbier once again. Its gray-white body also showed a faint luster. When all of the White Lotus giant silkworm Gu were killed, and the meat given to Clean's Soul Immortal Gu were all eaten, Clean's Soul Immortal Gu was no longer as weak as before, it could fly in the sky. It was like a gray-white tadpole, its round head was like a small balloon, its tail was wriggling around behind it as it swam slowly like an old man without much strength. It opened its mouth occasionally, its mouth was half the size of its head. Right now, it could open it and make some soft noises. Fang Yuan knew that it was trying to express that it still wanted more food. But all of the White Lotus giant silkworm Gu were used up, not a single one was left. Even though Clean's Soul Immortal Gu was not satisfied, Fang Yuan sighed in relief. For now, Clean's Soul Immortal Gu had escaped the awkward fate of dying from hunger. After all, Fang Yuan had been ready to give up on it. Now that it was still alive, this was a good ending. Most importantly, he managed to get precious time for it. One could not be certain about the future, anything is possible. Clean's Soul Immortal Gu was not full, thus Fang Yuan kept it while trying not to use it. After temporarily solving Clean's Soul Immortal Gu's feeding problem, Fang Yuan could relax, but he did not take a break. Instead, he made use of his time and rushed into an underground cave again. In the underground cave, there was a Ji forest. The tallest Lingji king was 6 meters tall, reaching the ceiling of the cave. The flesh of the Lingji was like a huge umbrella, spreading out in a circular manner. When Fang Yuan reached here, he saw that the rank 9 wisdom Gu was flying around this Lingji king. It was like a child playing around, flapping its wings and bobbing up and down. At times, it bumped into the Lingji king and was bounced back by the rubbery flesh. Fang Yuan's was inwardly moved. He had many immortal Gu, but compared to them, the rank 9 wisdom Gu had much more intelligence. It was quite extraordinary. Thinking about it, the legends of Renzu, wisdom Gu, strength Gu, and the others could speak to Renzu. Of course, this might have been exaggeration from the story. But Fang Yuan knew that wisdom Gu could be communicated with. Precisely because of this, Fang Yuan could bring wisdom Gu away during the final moments before Imperial Court Blessed Land's destruction, and be able to use its light of wisdom now. EAD New Chapt. RS on no/v/e/l. In.com. After seeing Fang Yuan, wisdom Gu stopped flying. It stopped on the thick stem of the Lingji king. After Fang Yuan sat down on a shorter Lingji like it was a chair, wisdom Gu started to give off the halo of the light of wisdom, covering Fang Yuan in it. Fang Yuan activated Star Thought Gu. Star Thought Gu was a one-time consumable Gu. With the expenditure of each Star Thought Gu, the thoughts in Fang Yuan's mind moved rapidly and generated endlessly. At once, in his mind, starlight specks were created. A moment later, it was like the night sky, countless stars were shining brightly. It was a beautiful sight. Fang Yuan tried to make deductions. Instantly, star thoughts in his mind burst into action. It was like water poured into a hot pan. Star specks moved like meteors, starlight spun around, they collided into one another or repelled each other. His inspiration was unlimited. There were many aspects of deduction. he obtained many answers from the complex procedure. It was completed in a moment. Fang Yuan stopped at once. He opened his eyes, showing immense joy in his expression. Earlier, he was just giving it a try. This wisdom path inheritance really did not disappoint him. It was even better than his expectations. Dong Fang Chang Fan's wisdom path inheritance is truly suited for deductions. Star thoughts are so durable. My initial estimation is that one star thought can substitute for 3 to 4 malicious thoughts and memory thoughts. Fang Yuan assessed in his mind. In wisdom path there were 3 aspects: thoughts, wills and emotions. But thoughts varied greatly. There were all sorts of thoughts. It could be said that there were countless kinds of them. Thoughts were all different. They had their own advantages and weaknesses. For example, malicious thoughts were good for plotting against others. Memory thoughts were good for digging up information in memories. But these two were just average when used for deductions. Star thoughts were not good at plotting or digging up memories, but they were extremely useful for deductions. One star thought was equivalent to 3 to 4 other thoughts. This might seem rather insignificant. But looking at it, how many thoughts were expended to deduce one immortal killer move or immortal Gu recipe? When this amount becomes huge, the difference would be great. When hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands or even millions of thoughts are consumed, the advantage of using star thoughts to do deductions would be immense. One could say that this star thought wisdom path inheritance was most suited for Fang Yuan. All along, he had been restricted by the number of thoughts he had. The light of wisdom had intense expenditure. It could use up any number of thoughts quickly. Fang Yuan had many things to deduce in accordance with his plans. The first was the immortal killer move vaguely familiar face. Previously, he did not succeed, he only finished a portion of it. The second was to complete the immortal Gu recipe of blood deity. He did not succeed either with that, he only gave it a small attempt. The third was to deduce an immortal killer move to allow time luck immortal Gu and inch of time to work together, to reduce the consumption of inch of time while amplifying one's own luck temporarily. Fang Yuan had tried this earlier, but he failed because his time path attainment level was too low. Now, he did not have to deduce it anymore, because Fang Yuan had obtained an even better immortal killer move from Fairy Li Shan, time assist luck. Fourth was to fuse pulling mountain and pulling water, these two strength path immortal Gu, into the immortal killer move myriad self, and make myriad self even stronger. The fifth was to modify air sac Gu and the other Gu refinement recipes, to subdivide the steps even further, to lower the risk of Gu refinement and reduce the death rate of the hairy men. Fang Yuan breathed in deeply, calming his mind. Vaguely familiar face was the one that he needed to place most importance in deducing, because the situation in the outside world was getting more tense. If Fang Yuan wanted to move around, he needed an immortal level disguise to prevent his identity from being exposed. Air sac Gu and the other Gu recipes were not an urgent matter. Moreover, this plan involved too many details. In the future when Fang Yuan expanded his Gu refinement scale, he would not be refining just air sac Gu, memory thought Gu, malicious thought Gu and star thought Gu. As for blood deity, it was only a long-term plan, it was not even necessary to him. After all, Fang Yuan was cultivating strength path now, and was planning to cultivate time path or wisdom path. He did not want to develop blood path. If it was in the past, Fang Yuan would naturally deduce the immortal killer move vaguely familiar face first, but now that Hu immortal blessed land was facing its earthly calamity soon, Fang Yuan's first priority was to fuse pulling mountain immortal Gu into myriad self-killer move. Fang Yuan shut his eyes and settled his mind, he deduced with all his concentration. Starlight reacted in his mind, as countless star thoughts rumbled. Time passed, an hour, 4 hours, half a day, 1 day, 2 days later. On the afternoon of the third day, Fang Yuan opened his eyes, even with his immortal zombie physique, exhaustion was written all over his face. He was very tired. I finally fused pulling Mountain Immortal Gu into my killer move, Myriad Self. Myriad Self's power has risen by 10%. If I am dealing with Earth Path Gu Immortals, or any mountains or rocks, the effect would be even greater, at least 20% higher. Fong Yuan inspected his Star Thought Gu. There were about 40,000 Star Thought Gu left in his immortal aperture. He originally had 50,000 Star Thought Gu, in other words, this deduction used up 10,000 Star Thought Gu. Star Thought Gu were really durable. Of course, this durability is only for deductions. If I use Star Thought Gu to plot against others or think about harmful schemes, Malicious Thought Gu would be better. In terms of recollection, Star Thought Gu is inferior to Memory Thought Gu. Be it Star Thought Gu, Memory Thought Gu, or Malicious Thought Gu, he still had to refine them and keep a huge stock. This was a huge project, it was a long-term goal. Looking at the time, it was still not the point of who immortal blessed land's calamity. But if he used the remaining time to deduce the immortal killer move vaguely familiar face, it was insufficient, he could not get anything done. Fong Yuan thus returned to Dang Hun Palace, continuing to research on the Wisdom Path inheritance. This immortal level Wisdom Path inheritance had a lot of information. There were hundreds of Mortal Gu recipes, more than 10 Immortal Gu recipes, dozens of Mortal Killer moves, and close to 10 Immortal Killer moves. They comprised offense, defense, movement, storage, healing, and others. Other than that, there were many Wisdom Path techniques and methods. For example, secret arts that could expand the size of the mind, or the modification of the heart into a space for additional thinking, unique methods like that. There was even knowledge about astronomy and geography, the map of the 5 regions' resources, the analysis of Northern Plains forces, an introduction to all sorts of dangers one can face when cultivating, and how to resolve them. Most importantly, there were details on how a Gu master can undergo immortal ascension, an introduction to all sorts of heavenly tribulations and earthly calamities and how to deal with them. Of course, there were details about other paths, like Fire Path, Metal Path, Space Path and Time Path, the strengths and weaknesses of these paths, what needs do they have and how to deal with them in combat. There were even some insights on how to handle management, especially in a Gu Immortal's blessed land, to allow one to survive and progress further. One could say that this was a Gu Master's encyclopedia to become a Gu Immortal. It allowed one to be realistic and decipher what was easy and hard, to gain methods of dealing with enemies and grow stronger. This inheritance was not just the credit of the Creator, the Heavenly Court Star Path Gu Immortal. Each of the Gu Immortals who cultivated after receiving this inheritance had added in more details and modified the information. After generations and generations of effort and hard work, this cultivation encyclopedia was created. Fong Yuan could see much of the ancient history of Central Continent and Northern Plains in it. And at the end of the information on immortal killer moves, Fong Yuan saw that the last, newest edition was the previous owner's, Dong Fong Chong Fan's, immortal killer move, Myriad Star Fireflies. Chapter 8:18, Vanishing Immortal Essence Dissipation, Profound Ice House. This inheritance's value could not be expressed in words. It was even more huge than the blood path inheritance that Fong Yuan obtained in his previous life. Upt. TED Chapters. NN. Velbin.com. Even Fong Yuan was sighing, if I had obtained this inheritance earlier, be it this life or my previous life, I would have become a Gu Immortal long ago. Fong Yuan had spent so many years staggering along his cultivation journey, crossing rivers carefully by stepping on every rock, finally reaching his achievements today. In contrast, when Dong Fong Chong Fan was still immortal, he received this inheritance. His luck was truly something to be envious about. Eastern Sea, Yulu Blessed Land. It was drizzling with a thin fog in the air. The Gu immortals from Eastern Sea Zombie Alliance were trapped inside, they were looking for an exit vigilantly. Damn it, don't let the rain touch you, it has the ability to consume your immortal essence. The expression of the leading immortal zombie, Shark Demon, changed as he shouted at the immortals behind him. Shark Demon had rich experience, he reacted rapidly, the moment he saw the ability of this seemingly harmless drizzle, he knew this was an attack. Hearing his warning, the immortals used all sorts of methods and put up their defenses, blocking the drizzle. But it was no use. This drizzle penetrates everything. Is this the immortal killer move that Fairy Yulu was famous for, vanishing immortal essence dissipation rain? An immortal zombie thought of a crucial piece of information, as his expression turned very ugly. Even the great vanishing immortal essence dissipation rain cannot have such incredible ability, our defenses have literally no effect. Another immortal zombie shouted, showing an extremely shocked expression. I got it. In the previous round, we were hit by the immortal killer move, Raindrop Equity. Thus, in this round, our defenses have no use against the vanishing immortal essence dissipation rain, we can only let it touch us. Immortal zombie Sue Bai Man's eyes shined with brilliance as she said. The immortals communicated rapidly, the moment they got the answer, their hearts sank. This was not the first time they were attacking Yulu Blessed Land, there were many rounds in Yulu Blessed Land, each round was interconnected with others and was very difficult to deal with. Immortal zombies consisted of most of this group of Gu immortals. There were a total of 7 people, 5 were immortal zombies. Immortal zombies have dead immortal apertures, they cannot manage their blessed lands that are filled with death energy, they could not produce immortal essence naturally. Thus, if immortal zombies wanted to have immortal essence, they would need to convert it using immortal essence stones. Immortal essence of immortal zombies was much more precious compared to ordinary Gu immortals, they were not easy to obtain. Now that the immortals were in this round, before they had even fought, the vanishing immortal essence dissipation rain was already vaporizing their immortal essence, it was hitting at their weakness. Seeing the immortal essence that they had painstakingly saved up vanish bead by bead, the immortal zombies felt a strong sense of loss. They discussed among themselves and quickly came to an agreement, they had to get through this round quickly and find a way out, otherwise they would be in danger. The immortals used all sorts of methods, but an hour later, they made no progress. Oh no, this battlefield killer move is so hard to resolve, more than 30 beads of my immortal essence have melted. Fairy Yulu was the second disciple of Paradise Earth Immortal Venerable, she was a rank 8 grade expert. Paradise Earth Immortal Venerable was most skilled in battlefield killer moves. Fairy Yulu was Paradise Earth Immortal Venerable's disciple, she had learned the core of this ability, not only did she know many battlefield killer moves, she even innovated and created her own versions. This battlefield killer move was her personal creation, it was not recorded in history. This battlefield killer move has no attacking power, but it has a huge range, when used with vanishing immortal essence dissipation rain, it is being used to drain us to nothing. What shall we do? Almost all of their methods were used up, the Gu immortals were starting to panic. Shark Demon, the leader, had a grim expression, he looked at the Wisdom Path Gu immortal in the group as he shouted, Bo Dan, what are you doing? It's been so long, haven't you deduced the flaw in this battlefield killer move? Bo Dan had his forehead covered in sweat from the scolding, he replied in anxiety and worry, I'm unable to. This battlefield killer move is simply too profound, it surpasses the previous battlefield killer move by a huge margin. The wisdom path inheritance I have is incomplete, I cannot think of a way to break through this. This Bo Dan was a living person and a wisdom path Gu immortal, but he was scolded by the immortal zombie shark demon fiercely, he cowered like a helpless puppy. Eastern Sea Zombie Alliance was the headquarters of Zombie Alliance, it was different from the other 4 regions, it had a huge force and surpassed ordinary super forces by a margin. The Zombie Alliance headquarters not only had many immortal zombie experts, it also had living goo immortals. These living goo immortals had lower statuses than immortal zombies in most cases. Shark Demon's anger resided slightly after he shouted. He said with some regret, Bo Dan is powerless. Our only choice is to use Profound Icehouse and forcefully attack, to see if a path can be created. The other goo immortals were overjoyed, their eyes shined, to think that Lord Shark Demon borrowed Profound Icehouse for this trip. Tai Bai Yun Sheng's eyes were also shining. In Eastern Sea, Zombie Alliance was very powerful, it was a ruler of the region, it was a senior among the super forces. For instance, it had 3 immortal goo houses. Of course, only one was complete, the other 2 were extremely incomplete. But even an incomplete immortal goo house could be forcibly activated, it had great power. Shark Demon was a rank 7 expert. Ever since he took the mission from Eastern Sea Zombie Alliance's main base to attack Yulu Blessed Land, he had entered the Blessed Land multiple times and passed many rounds. The more rounds they passed, the more emphasis he placed on Yulu Blessed Land. This time, when exploring the Blessed Land, he had borrowed Profound Icehouse from Zombie Alliance after paying a huge price, due to the urging of his wife, Su Bai Man. Shark Demon took out Profound Icehouse. This house was not big, it was like a ball that resembled a block of ice. Once it was taken out, the air turned cold, many goo immortals felt a chill. Shark Demon did not speak, he opened the door of the house, entering it. Next, his beloved wife Su Bai Man went in, followed by the other 5. Inside the house, there was a huge ball-shaped space with no furniture. The immortals were floating inside, and they were surrounded by a cold white light. Within the white light, there were traces of golden light. In several breaths' time, the golden light stabilized, they were like golden threads weaving together into a formation chart. Shark Demon ordered the immortals to stand on the formation core. He said, everyone, expend your immortal essence and activate this immortal goo house. This immortal goo house will record how much immortal essence you put in. Everyone knew that activating this immortal goo house would expend immortal essence extensively. This activation was probably going to be higher than the amount they had lost in the vanishing immortal essence dissipation rain. If not for this weakness, Shark Demon would have used the immortal goo house long ago. This time, they charged into Yulu Blessed Land without killing any strong enemies or encountering any battles, but they had made such a loss, they consumed a lot of immortal essence, everyone was feeling gloomy. But hearing this, they restrained their gloomy thoughts and put in all their effort. Several minutes later, on the calm surface of Eastern Sea, a huge icy meteor flew out. The meteor charged out at a high speed, penetrating the water surface and reaching tens of meters into the sky in the blink of an eye. The meteor stopped suddenly in the air, it went from high speed to stillness, showing its true form. It was the rank 6 immortal goo house, incomplete Profound Ice House. Come out. In the house, Shark Demon said with a look of dejection. Immediately, the doors opened and the immortals flew out, floating in the air. In the air, the immortals looked down. The sea had turbulent waves, it was no longer calm like before, this was caused by Profound Icehouse emerging to the surface. But the immortals' mind were all on Yulu Blessed Land, which had been placed deep underwater. The immortals had attacked Yulu Blessed Land more than once, there were victories and losses. Now was not their first loss, but it was the most dispiriting one. Attacking Yulu Blessed Land was not about attacking it forcefully, it was about balancing the gains and losses. This Yulu Blessed Land was firmly controlled by Eastern Sea Zombie Alliance, there were no other forces trying to compete for it, thus, they could explore it at their own pace and progress slowly. Facing such a mystical battlefield killer move, even if they used Profound Ice House, they could only leave the Blessed Land, they could not break through it. In that case, what should they do to pass this round? Shark Demon was the last to walk out. He retrieved Profound Icehouse and thought to himself with a hint of dejection, I made a huge loss this time. Not only did I gain nothing from attacking Yulu Blessed Land, I even used Profound Icehouse. When we get back to Zombie Alliance, I will have to pay a huge amount of contribution points. Thankfully, we had Profound Icehouse, otherwise we would still be trapped inside. Gu Immortal Bo Dan said with some lingering fear. Shark Demon gave him a harsh glance. He quickly shut up. The other Gu Immortals nodded slightly. They felt glad that Shark Demon brought Profound Icehouse along with him on this trip. This vanishing immortal essence dissipation rain is too powerful. Even the immortal Gu house could not defend against it. We were still hit by it. At another side, Tai Bai Yunxing suddenly spoke. Seeing Tai Bai Yunxing speak, Shark Demon's expression became milder as he said, that is because this Profound Ice House's greatest purpose is to help Ice Path Gu Immortals cultivate. Don't be deceived by its ordinary-looking appearance. Inside it is extremely damaged. It was fixed to the extent of barely being usable. If this was a complete immortal Gu house, we could use it to defend even if we were inside. So that is it. Tai Bai Yunxing nodded, not saying anything else. Alright, this trip of exploring Yulu Blessed Land has ended, we can split up here. Shark Demon waved his hand, declaring this. The immortals left one by one rapidly. But Tai Bai Yunxing was in no hurry to leave. Sir Tai Bai, are there any issues? Su Bai Man asked. This immortal zombie couple were extremely courteous to Tai Bai Yunxing. The reason was the man as before immortal Gu in Tai Bai Yunxing's possession. Tai Bai Yunxing smiled, both of you know I am a Northern Plains Gu immortal, I've been in Eastern Sea for some time already. Su Bai Man and Shark Demon gave each other a glance before nodding together. They knew this. Tai Bai Yunxing could not conceal his aura as he did not have a method like Old Lord Kenyang. Thus, his Northern Plains Gu immortal identity was exposed long ago. But this was not strange. Because Eastern Sea had the earth tide. Once in a while, from the bottom of the sea, there would be a boundless force from the earth. It was grand and imposing, the might of nature. It was a fearsome power that far exceeded the limits of rank 8 Gu immortals. The force from the earth would move up, stirring the seawater, causing the earth tide. The power of the earth tide was great, it could easily whip up giant tsunamis. The earth tide would collide on the regional walls, causing them to weaken. Chapter 8:19, Returning to the Blessed Land, Putting Up a Show. It was already an extremely difficult thing for Gu immortals to pass a regional wall. However, at this time every year, because of the earth tide, Eastern Sea's regional wall would become weaker and thinner, and Gu immortals of Central Continent, Northern Plains and Southern Border could take this chance to enter Eastern Sea. Naturally, there were also a few Eastern Sea Gu immortals that took this chance to enter Central Continent, Northern Plains or Southern Border. Thus, it was not a strange thing for Gu immortals of these three regions to come to Eastern Sea. However, it was rare for Western Desert Gu immortals to be in Eastern Sea. Western Desert and Eastern Sea were separated by the other regions in the middle. It would definitely be eye-catching if a Western Desert Gu immortal appeared in Eastern Sea. There were 5 regions: Central Continent, Northern Plains, Southern Border, Western Desert and Eastern Sea. Among them, Central Continent had the highest all-around strength, with countless Gu master sections. Southern Border was covered with hundreds of thousands of mountains. Northern Plains terrain was flat and boundless, the tribes moved around the most and they were the most battle-hardened. And Eastern Sea was the most abundant in resources. In the vast sea areas and deep seas, countless water creatures, sea beasts, minerals and precious stones were hidden. The Gu immortals of Central Continent, Northern Plains and Southern Border came to Eastern Sea mostly for these resources, and this situation was common. Especially northern plains, where battles occurred the most and resources were few, their Gu immortals came to Eastern Sea to seek opportunities to grow, and there were also many who came to stay away from trouble. Tai Bai Yun Sheng continued, with your support, I have been able to make good progress in Eastern Sea, and now my immortal aperture is showing signs of instability. The earth tide is arriving. I want to take this chance to return to northern plains and place my blessed land down, to stabilize my immortal aperture for the earthly calamity. So it is like that. Shark Demon nodded. We should have thought of that. Sir Tai Bai should pay attention to safety when you leave. Maybe you can let us drop you there. Su Bai Man suggested while smiling. Tai Bai Yun Sheng waved his hand, no need, no need. Shark Demon and Su Bai Man did not insist when they saw Tai Bai Yun Sheng's refusal. The regional wall would become weaker because of the earth tide, but endless tidal forces would be present at the weak area. They were like countless reefs and vortexes, and it could get very dangerous. To pass through these, one must have an accurate map of the route. This kind of map was extremely precious. It was better if the map was deduced by a wisdom path Gu immortal, but if one did not have wisdom path methods, they could only rely on themselves to map the route through trial and error. If Tai Bai Yun Sheng let the two escort him, then wouldn't his route be revealed? Thus, Shark Demon and his wife did not insist. After dealing with my matters in northern plains, I will return in the next earth tide. Maybe I can even persuade a few friends to come with me. Tai Bai Yun Sheng spoke this, as a way of preparing for Fang Yuan's appearance. Good. Brother Tai Bai's friends are our friends, we will definitely welcome them properly. Shark Demon laughed and said with great enthusiasm. Tai Bai Yun Sheng bade his farewell. When Tai Bai Yun Sheng's receding figure had shrunk to the size of an ant, Su Bai Man frowned as she sent a transmission to Shark Demon. Although the regional wall will be weakened, the earth tide is terrifying. If one is just the slightest bit careless and struck by the formless tidal forces, fractured bones would be the least of their problems. It is very possible for them to die a violent death on the spot. Did you see how relaxed Tai Bai Yun Sheng appeared? He definitely has complete confidence in his route. Are we really not going to follow him? If we had this route, we could also enter northern plains, and even if we don't have any use for it, we can turn it over to Zombie Alliance for large amounts of contribution points and reduce the losses of this attempt. Shark Demon firmly refused, no need. The routes are not fixed in place. After some earth tides, the formless tidal forces would change greatly, and the old routes will lose their value. Our main goal is to cooperate with him to use man as before for our revival. This is a long-term plan and we cannot harm the good relation between us and him for small profits in the short term. Alright, I will listen to you. Su Bai Man dispelled her thoughts, looking at her husband with a warm gaze. Her zombie face, however, was somewhat terrifying. Shark Demon did not care in the slightest as he affectionately took Su Bai Man in his arms, letting her lean on his chest while he consoled her gently. I know what you are worried about. We hold the task of attacking Yu Lu blessed land, and by using profound ice house, our losses have become large. But it doesn't matter, who doesn't suffer setbacks and failures as they live in this world? We still have the foundation to sustain the losses. Now we have the hope of revival. Don't be afraid, no matter what the future is like, how many difficulties we face, I will always guard you by your side. Dear. The vast eastern sea and the clear sky merged into one at the horizon, and seagulls could be seen occasionally flying in the sky. Tai Bai Yun Sheng flew through the sky without stopping. White fog lingered around his body, increasing his speed without producing any noise. Naturally, this was only a mortal killer move, and it could not compare to Fang Yuan's 3 pairs of true solid bat wings. And once Fang Yuan's Iron Crown Eagle strength activated, the disparity between them would become even greater. However, this killer move had its own advantages. As the clouds covered one's body, mortals would not be able to see him. This was not yet the time of 5 regions' chaotic war, there was a chasm between Gu immortals and mortals. Most mortal Gu masters had only heard of immortals and had no personal experiences with them. Many even only thought of immortals in a similar way to wispy legends. Upt. TED Chapters. N. Velbin.com. Tai Bai Yunxing was, after all, a Northern Plains Gu immortal and was an outsider in Eastern Sea, thus he tried to keep a low profile. At the beginning, as per Fang Yuan's instructions, he received tasks of restoring sea areas in High Shirt Blessed Land, and after making a name, he was able to get connected to Shark Demon and others. All the attempts at attacking Yu Lu Blessed Land essentially included him as well. Shark Demon and his wife treated him very well, which was naturally because of his man as before. Shark Demon possessed Time Anchor Immortal Gu, which, when used with man as before, produced a hope of revival. However, Shark Demon and Su Bai Man had no thoughts of seizing man as before Immortal Gu. Unless one had methods like those of thieving Heaven Demon Venerable, it was almost impossible to forcibly take Immortal Gu. Dong Fang Chang Fan was so weak and Fang Yuan held such huge dominance, but at the end, Dong Fang Chang Fan self-detonated with just a thought, not giving Fang Yuan even one Immortal Gu as the spoils for battle. The difficulty of seizing Immortal Gu was evident. Tai Bai Yunxing flew for a long while before he finally saw a gray streak on the surface of the sea. As he approached closer, the gray streak in his sight gradually enlarged. It was a small island. This island did not have a spirit spring and it was scarce in vegetation, it was basically a bare, grayish-brown rock, even sea birds rarely visited it. In a region with bountiful resources like Eastern Sea, it was a barren place. However, Tai Bai Yunxing was a Gu immortal, he did not care about this, only treating it as a temporary residence. An isolated island with a barren landscape would naturally not be coveted by anyone, reducing potential attention and trouble. Tai Bai Yunxing slowly landed on the island. He first inspected the Gu formation he had set to see if there had been any changes. These Gu formations were all coarsely arranged by him. One use was for simple monitoring, and another use was that if some other Gu immortals came here, the Gu formation would indicate that this island was not ownerless. After inspecting it, Tai Bai Yunxing found close to 10 additional Gu worms. These were all information path Gu worms, carrying messages. Originally, although Tai Bai Yunxing had been low-key in his conduct, but as a time path healing Gu immortal with extremely useful Immortal Gu on him, he earned quite a bit of attention and could not be hidden for long. These information path Gu came from all sorts of parties, some were from super forces, some from the demonic path, some from immortal zombies and some from righteous path lone cultivators. Most of them were requests for Tai Bai Yunxing to remedy certain things. A smaller portion did not request Tai Bai Yunxing to immediately help, but wanted to establish friendly relations. If by chance, a mishap happened in the future, would this relationship not be of use? Tai Bai Yunxing had a benign nature, and also possessed 2 time path Immortal Gu, thus he was greatly welcomed in Eastern Sea. Tai Bai Yunxing collected these information path Gu worms and entered a cavern. He had only made this cavern for temporary use and had not spent any efforts on it, thus it looked very crude and simple. Tai Bai Yunxing first replied to these information path Gu worms, excusing himself from the invitations one by one, before sinking into deep thought. I can open a stargate to conveniently return to Hu Immortal Blessed Land. But if I directly open a stargate now, it can ruin the situation. Tai Bai Yunxing could now be considered to have some fame, his actions would be secretly observed by many people. Thus, his return to Hu Immortal Blessed Land this time was more troublesome than previous times. He would really have to put on a false show of approaching the regional wall, using a stargate after there was nobody paying attention. Who immortal blessed land. Fang Yuan had been studying the wisdom path inheritance for 3 days and 3 nights. He did not know how many thoughts were expended in his mind, in producing many insights. Dong Fang Chang Fan was brimming with talent. This wisdom path inheritance in itself primarily gave priority to deductions, and is not specialized for battles, but he conceived the immortal killer move Myriad Star Fireflies, which is a unique concept that almost perfectly transforms the superiority in deduction of the inheritance into offensive power. In this entire inheritance, Myriad Star Fireflies is truly worthy of being the strongest offensive killer move. This was why Fang Yuan was sighing inwardly. His nature was different from Tai Bai Yun Sheng, his was a nature filled with heavy aggressiveness. The first thing he paid attention to was the offensive methods of the inheritance. How did Myriad Star Fireflies cause Fang Yuan to sigh inwardly? The foundation of this move was still Star Thought Gu. Every starlight firefly was encased in a star thought. The consumption of using this move was terrifying. Not only immortal essence, it also expended the wisdom path Dao marks in the Gu immortal's body. Gu immortals contain Dao marks in their bodies. Fang Yuan had strength path Dao marks, fire path Gu immortals had fire path Dao marks. Dong Fang Chang Fan's body naturally had wisdom path Dao marks. Every time he used this move, it would consume at least 16 wisdom path Dao marks. Dao marks were very hard to obtain. To obtain Dao marks, besides rare and unique methods, the most common and orthodox method was to pass heavenly tribulations and earthly calamities. Every tribulation and calamity passed could add Dao marks to the Gu immortal's body. The amount of Dao marks received was determined by the strength of the heavenly tribulation or earthly calamity. The stronger the heavenly tribulation or earthly calamity, the more Dao marks would be obtained. Chapter 820, Insufficient Wealth to Refine Immortal Gu. Myriad Star Fireflies was a move that expended at least 16 Dao marks when used. There was no upper limit. The greater the range of Myriad Star Fireflies, or the higher its power, the more Dao marks would be consumed when using it. But that was precisely why this move was extremely strong. The Dao marks enter space, forming a peculiar battlefield. It was hard to destroy. When Gu immortals entered the range, their thoughts would turn into star thoughts, forming the attack for Myriad Star Fireflies. As time passes, Myriad Star Fireflies would grow stronger. This was converting the enemy's strength into one's own strength, and attacking them with it. To enemy Gu immortals, this was an obscene feeling. It was like they were dropping a rock onto their own feet, or taking a dagger and stabbing themselves. After understanding the secret of Myriad Star Fireflies' usage, Fang Yuan understood something else. No wonder that in the past, Dong Fang Chang Fan usually used plots and schemes to deal with matters. Only until he had no choice would he take action by using Myriad Star Fireflies. Because even though Dong Fang Chang Fan was the #1 wisdom path Gu immortal of the current generation in Northern Plains, he could not use Myriad Star Fireflies frequently. Its cost was too high. Once Dao marks were expended, they could not be recovered. Dao marks were hard to obtain. Most Gu immortals could only get a large number of Dao marks after going through a tribulation. This Myriad Star Fireflies is on par with my current killer move, Myriad Self. Of course, my killer move, Myriad Self, still has a lot of room for improvements. Myriad Star Fireflies cannot compete with it in this regard. I do not have any Wisdom Path Dao marks. Unless I enter into Wisdom Path, I might never be able to use this killer move in my lifetime. Of course, there was also another important point to consider. That was, this killer move, Myriad Star Fireflies, needed a core of 3 Wisdom Path Immortal Gu. Fang Yuan did not have a single one. When Dong Fang Chang Fan lost, he self-detonated all of his Immortal Gu. He did not leave any to Fang Yuan. Among these 3 Wisdom Path Immortal Gu, the one Fang Yuan wanted the most was Star Thought Immortal Gu. There were more than 10 immortal Gu recipes in this wisdom path inheritance. Among them was the recipe for star thought immortal Gu. There was even the refinement experiences of all the past inheritors, and all of their findings after failures. Once he had star thought immortal Gu, Fang Yuan would not need to waste so much effort in slowly accumulating the mortal star thought Gu. The inheritance said, one bead of green grape immortal essence could produce 100,000 star thoughts from the use of star thought immortal Gu. Of course, if Fang Yuan used star thought immortal Gu, the number he would obtain would be less than 100,000. That was because each of the wisdom path Gu immortal inheritors had wisdom path Dao marks in them, that amplified the effect of star thought immortal Gu. It was the same as how Fang Yuan could increase Giant Hand's power by 20% with his strength path Dao marks. 20% was very low. Ordinary Gu immortal experts had Dao marks that could increase the power of their immortal Gu, and their immortal killer moves would grow in power accordingly. Twice, thrice, 4 or 5 times, 10 times, or even 100 times. One of the main reasons why the difference between rank 7 and 8 was so great was due to this. The higher the cultivation level, the more terrifying the tribulations. Once they passed them, they would obtain a greater number of Dao marks. Fortune and disaster appeared in turn. From another perspective, the stronger the heavenly tribulation or earthly calamity, the more benefits one would obtain. It was a good thing. Once Fang Yuan had star thought immortal Gu, in terms of deductions, he would have fewer obstacles. He would not need to plan their consumption so painstakingly, maintaining such minimal and cautious consumption of star thought Gu. In addition, with his current wealth, he could sustain the expenditure of it. But the problem was, though Fang Yuan could sustain the cost of using the immortal Gu, he could not afford to refine the immortal Gu itself. Even though he made some profits, he was still a long way from refining immortal Gu. Immortal Gu were unique, they were fragments of the great Tao. The immortal essence stones and immortal materials expended when refining immortal Gu were extremely great. Most importantly, when refining immortal Gu, one could not prepare just one set of materials, they had to prepare many portions because the success rate of refining immortal Gu was too low. Dong Fang Chang Fan was a formidable person in his time, the #1 wisdom path Gu immortal in Northern Plains. He was in control of a super force for many years. He had also secretly worked with Immortal Crane sect, obtaining a fair sum of funds. But even so, at his peak, he only had 8 immortal Gu in his possession. Among these 8, there was Menzi's Blood immortal Gu and Split Shadow immortal Gu. These immortal Gu were not of wisdom path. There were more than 10 immortal Gu recipes in his wisdom path inheritance. Among them, he only refined less than half. For example, looking at old ancestor Xuehu and Lady Wan Shou, the former had the highest battle strength among the rank 8s in Northern Plains, while the latter was one of the 4 most famous refinement path Gu immortals in Northern Plains. They had deep foundations and were very affluent. But to refine the rank 8 fortune rivaling heaven immortal Gu, even though they had Ma Hongyun and could save a lot of resources, the rest of the resources needed still used up almost all of their savings. It could be said that they were going all in on this. With Fang Yuan's current situation, wanting to refine immortal Gu was simply wishful thinking. Other than star thought immortal Gu, there was an immortal killer move that Fang Yuan thought highly of. It was called star fog concealment. This move was used to enshroud a Gu immortal in a layer of foggy starlight for extended periods of time. It could conceal their appearance and prevent others from seeing it. This was just the surface level effect. Its true effect was to conceal the Gu immortal from appearing as among the secrets of heaven. When other Gu immortals tried to deduce matters about this Gu immortal, the information would be concealed in fog. They would obtain unclear answers. This was almost like the effect of Dark Limit Immortal Gu. Dark Limit Immortal Gu's effect was to make the Gu immortal be overlooked and for others to fail in the deduction. Star fog concealment obscured the information and make deductions harder, getting unclear answers. This Wisdom Path Immortal Killer move was one of the more unorthodox ones in the Wisdom Path inheritance. Many of the inheritors did not use it in their lifetimes, thus the recorded experiences on this move were very few in number. Because Wisdom Path Gu Immortals were rare to begin with, Wisdom Path Gu Immortals rarely plotted against or attempted to make each other's schemes fail. Under most situations, even if they used it, they could not know what their enemies sensed when deducing information on them. But to Fang Yuan, this was very useful to him. Wasn't his motive for getting the Wisdom Path inheritance to defend against other Wisdom Path Gu Immortals, to greatly delay the information of him being the culprit from being exposed to everyone? But unfortunately, this Immortal Killer move needed 2 Wisdom Path Immortal Gu as the core. But the problem was this: Fang Yuan did not have the wealth to refine Immortal Gu. Eventually, after Fang Yuan browsed through the entire Wisdom Path inheritance, he realized that what he could learn and make use of currently, while also being suitable for himself, was only one particular part. It was how to deal with enemy wills. There was a lot of content on this: how to defend against enemy wills, how to differentiate wills, how to control enemy wills, what to do when under the control of enemy wills and how to control them instead, how to use wills to attack, important matters when engaging in a battle of wills, how to detect wills, how to heal wills, how to amplify the power of wills, how to weaken wills, and much more. Why did Fang Yuan want to learn this? Because in his hands, he had Mo Yao's will. Mo Yao had incredible refinement path attainment in her life. She was also an inkman with a lot of secrets of inkmen. She was even the lover of Bo Qin, and was a certain generation's fairy of spirit affinity house. She knew many historical events that were extremely valuable. What moved Fang Yuan the most was the Red Lotus Demon Venerable inheritance clues that she had. The vital Gu of Fang Yuan's first aperture, Spring-Autumn Cicada, was Red Lotus Demon Venerable's vital Gu in the past. Thus, he placed much importance on the details of this inheritance. He needed to learn this: how to search wills. Searching souls and searching wills were different matters with completely different difficulties. The former was easier, it was like eating, everyone had a mouth. Even though Fang Yuan was not in soul path, he could still search Tai Bai Yunxing's soul. Outsiders could try it. Explore new Uvels on N. Velbai.com. But searching wills was like a chef taste testing a dish, attempting to decipher the main ingredients, supplementary ingredients, condiments, and even the steps involved in producing the dish. This was much more difficult. In other words, this was a specialized technique, only Wisdom Path experts could try it. Thus, when Tai Bai Yunxing returned to Hu Immortal Blessed Land, Fang Yuan was in Dang Hun Palace, diligently practicing the methods to search wills. He had just started learning, he had no experience in this, he was still some way from using it feasibly. "Junior brother, have you been well?" Tai Bai Yunxing smiled lightly. He faced a lot of pressure in Eastern Sea, he could only relax now after seeing Fang Yuan. True friendships were forged in difficulties. To him, Fang Yuan's Hu Immortal Blessed Land was like his home. Fang Yuan invited him to sit down, asking with surprise when he saw the tattered clothing, "You got injured?" Tai Bai Yunxing smiled bitterly. He said with slight lingering fear, "Now is different from the time I first entered Eastern Sea. Some people are placing attention on me. I could not come back using a Stargate directly, I had to go to the regional wall and put up a show. To think that someone actually followed me, resulting in me seeing for myself the terrifying might of the earth tide. Even though the regional wall was weakened from the earth tide, near the earth tide, the formless tides were unstoppable. Even though I was at the periphery, I suffered greatly from it. Only defensive immortal killer moves have any effect. My 9-cloud ring was like paper in front of it." "Ah, let's not talk about this, junior brother. Did you have many gains?" "Ha ha ha." Fang Yuan started laughing. He would obviously not tell Tai Bai Yunxing that he, the fake, junior brother, had killed his real, senior brother. But Fang Yuan only hid some parts. he told most of the truth to Tai Bai Yunsheng. After Tai Bai Yunsheng heard that, he was quite in awe towards a person like Dong Fong Chong Fan. He talked to Fong Yuan about his own situation. The situation was such that Tai Bai Yunsheng was quite popular in Eastern Sea. With his development, at this rate, he could almost become a second fairy Li Shan. Tai Bai Yunsheng spoke about Yulu Blessed Land. Shark Demon had attacked it many times and faced endless difficulties, but he did not enter Yulu Blessed Land, he was stuck at the rounds in the outer periphery. Fong Yuan sighed. Fairy Yulu was a rank 8 Gu immortal, a disciple of Paradise Earth Immortal Venerable. Yulu Grotto Heaven dropped to become Yulu Blessed Land, but it still has that foundation. It might be that Yulu Blessed Land is one of the hardest kinds of blessed lands to take down. There are many aspects that influence defense. The first is if the blessed land is whole, the second is whether there is a land spirit, the third is the abundance of immortal essence, the fourth is the presence of guards like desolate beasts, the fifth is immortal Gu, the sixth is immortal killer moves, the seventh is immortal Gu houses, and the eighth is Gu immortals protecting it. But from what I see, the offense and defense of a blessed land only depends on one thing overall, that is the quantity of Dao marks. Tai Bai Yunsheng heard Fong Yuan's words and was nodding, these were all common sense. But when he heard Fong Yuan's last sentence, it was like a burst of enlightenment. He was inwardly moved as he said with much interest, "Please enlighten me." Fong Yuan did not answer. He asked Tai Bai Yunsheng, "Old Bai, do you know about the phrase, man is the spirit of all living beings, Gu are the essence of heaven and earth?"